Oh. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Exo Succeed. This is your host, Gearface, coming off of a very long hiatus to record a few more episodes. I'm joined today by consulting expert Koronair. Koronair, thank you so much for being here.
I'm always happy to be here. Always lots of fun.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time today. Today, Koronair is joining me to teach me a little bit about Syrus. Super excited to know a little bit about him, and I have it on good authority that you're the person to talk to here. So really excited to get started with this. Got a couple disclaimers before we start. As always, number one, I think that you should play Exceed for fun, audience. Yeah, I'm calling you out. Um, we're going to be talking about playing to win on this show, and those two things don't always overlap. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Um, if the lines of play that we're describing don't sound fun to you, I don't think you should play that way. Um, Instead, and this is the big secret, you should play the ways that you do find fun. And then disclaimer number two, we don't know everything. I don't know anything. Coroner knows some things. Together, we're going to balance it out pretty well. But don't treat anything that we're saying as irrefutable fact. Find your own lines of play. Exceed is not a solved game. We are going to be talking kind of for brevity's sake with a lot of always do this, never do that. Take all that with a grain of salt. It's not actually always and never. There's things that we don't know, and we are happy to be proven wrong. So find your own lines of play. Tell us where we're wrong with Syrus. With all that said, Coroner, please tell me a little bit about our friend here, Syrus.
Alrighty. So this is Syrus. He is a classic season 2, so we've got transforms in play, we've got horizontal shifts in terms of transformation. I would say for a transform character, while he does exceed into a different ability, and traditionally for season 2, those are not necessarily better, they're just different. I would say of them, his backside is, I would consider just a little bit better. You definitely need to spend some time on Exceeded, but as opposed to a lot of other season 2 characters, I don't know why I'm flipping that continuously. Don't mind me. As opposed to a lot of other season 2 characters where you may not ever exceed, or it is a sort of tactical shift into a different mode to handle different problems. I pretty much will always exceed with Syrus unless I got kind of stuck and I could not exceed with Syrus.
Okay, so plan A is going to be exceeding. When we talk about exceeding with any character, I'm going to pull up a couple examples here. Like you've got somebody like Chun-Li, where exceeding with Chun-Li is something that you need to do as soon as humanly possible so that you can play the fighting card game Exceed, right? And then there's other characters who want to exceed pretty much every game, but it's really possible to exceed too early or to exceed before you're ready. And you're not necessarily like sprinting to it if it's going to kill you to get there. Is Syrus the kind of character that, like, even though we want to be cool blue guy Syrus, we need to wait a little bit and do it when the time is right? Or are we actually just like sprinting for it?
So I would say it's not a full sprint.
Okay.
Even though the desire to be a cool, funky monster man is in my heart, you have to suppress that like a little bit. It's because you do need to get charged up on your resources. So Syrus, I'll get into more details later, but his front half is pretty much charging phase. So it is able to get you a lot of gauge and a lot of gauge, to be frank. Which for you gauges as normal, but it also has some other effects that you can do with it. So it's important to make sure that you have a sufficient enough gauge, and that front side can help you with that. It doesn't need to be massive. You don't need 8 gauge. You're not Arakune. But like if you're at 1, you might not want to flip immediately. You might want to be a little bit more set up first. Also, usually in the process of getting your transforms up to flip over, by the time you have 2 of them, which is around when I would usually do it, you're probably at least set up enough, or you don't have time, you have to do it now anyway.
Okay.
But not as soon as humanly possible, but I would go relatively fast.
Okay, that makes sense. And we're looking for a a combination of transforms that are gonna be engine components, but also just an overage of gauge that I assume, having not really looked at this card, um, add your continuous boost to your gauge. So oh no, that's what it is. This one builds you gauge.
Yes.
This one doesn't give you that ability anymore. So you want some gauge built up ahead of time so that you actually have something to play with.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay.
He is, in some, at least to me, he is the ocean. He is the ebb and flow of. He's a zoner who likes to use a lot of boosts to move a lot.
Okay.
So,
And looking at this guy, he would probably describe himself in sort of like oceanic, sort of poetic terms like that. So we're cool calling. We'll let him have that.
yeah. I mean, that's how I feel when I'm playing his. I'm shifting back and forth like the tides.
Okay.
And if
Okay.
I'm not, I'm dying.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
And then when you've shifted back and forth enough with the tides, tidal wave, hopefully, to kill your opponent.
That's true. You can tidal wave. You can tidal whirl.
Oh, you literally, yeah, okay.
Tidal whirl isn't usually the big hit, but you absolutely could. So we can get in a little bit more detail, so it makes a little bit more sense now. So yes, Tyrus, ties it in my heart. Syrus, Syrus, tends to do a lot. He does a lot of boosting, so a lot of both boosts, but mostly instantaneous boosts.
Okay.
And he zones people generally. You do not like one. You like three. You can do two. You can do a little bit farther out. You can do farther out. You don't like one. So a majority of his cards, his like favored range, is definitely 3 on the dot. He does have 3 ranged specials, as well as a ranged ultra. So all of his transform specials actually all hit out to either 5 or 6, and his ultra hits out to 6. His tidal whirl hits at 3 as well. It's 2 to 3. But 3 is kind of where it shines. And one of his specials hit 1 to 2. So meaning, of his cards, he has a single special, of which I would call the weakest of his specials, and a single ultra that hit at 1.
But that do anything in melee range. So
Yes.
skipping ahead to the very end of this lesson, when we talk about counterplay, it sounds like priority number 1 for my opponent is to go to range 1 and punch me in the face.
Correct.
Okay. So let's not let them do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Just in the sense of where you're kind of what your aim is, you don't want to sit really, really, really close, because that doesn't go well for you. It makes you exceedingly predictable, and you don't have that many options.
Sure.
Now you can grapple with your regular normals, but you kind of like your normals.
Yeah, and at minimum, you mentioned first of all that I'm going to be doing some instant boosts. There's some pretty good instant boosts among my normals, but also if I'm relying on my normals to brawl close up, if my opponent has those same normals and any good melee cards, they're going to just be better at that than I am, right?
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. So stick to my ranges, which sounds like I want to be kind of in that mid to long range band.
Yes. So, and this is I'm going to be describing my playstyle for Syrus, and I can mention some things that are not how I tend to do him, but grain of salt here, and this is what I do when I play him. So if there's another line here that other people tend to take, that not necessarily wrong, but this is what I tend to do with him. So I find most of my game plan is a lot of weaving back and forth, and in the process of that insta-boost weaving, you are charging up and getting more resource value than your opponent. So you you want to make sure you're not being too hasty just to throw something down, because you typically outvalue them in terms of certain boost wars, or like mid or like short-term boost wars in a sense.
Okay.
So I think take a look at his. I can't not move it. I'm sorry.
That's all good. You can move however you want.
We can take a look at his UAs. I think it's going to help get a better idea. So his front side UA is after resolving an instant boost, put it into play face down as a continuous boost that reads hit, add this card to your gauge. So whenever you use an instant boost, once you're done with it, it I'm gonna grab something. I'll return you later. You use it, you flip it over, you set it in front of you, as if it were a continuous boost. It sits here. If you hit, it goes to your gauge. This lets him generate quite a lot of gauge, using his instant boosts.
Okay.
So,
And
go ahead.
those instant boosts are giving me value in other ways, right? Like if we look at run, if I want to get out
Yes.
of the corner and go to range 3, I do that. That's a good play anyway. And then on top of it, it turns into a continuous boost that'll get me some value later.
Yes, if you are able to connect, not necessarily even win the strike, but connect, you get that force cost back from your card, essentially, because it
Okay.
is now, because it's connected, it's now become gauge. So you've spent a card from your hand and you can no longer attack with it, but you still have it as gauge now. So the force cost is neutralized, essentially, because it's one force for what can be used as one force.
Right.
And the resource cost, you do no longer have that attack from in your hand, but you also have gauge, which is a different resource. So it's a translation of that resource into a different type, and a net neutral in terms of just flat value there, depending on what you need.
So, do any of Syrus's special instant boosts? I'm looking through here. None of them let him strike. It doesn't look like.
No, that is the transform. So
Okay.
Syrus, what he does is he stacks up these boosts. It lets him move around a lot easier and a lot better than most other people, because while you're doing it, you're generating yourself that possible massive amount of gauge that other people won't get if they have to keep up with you.
Right.
His transforms also help make, I think, it a lot more apparent as to what goes on with this.
Okay.
Since I'll start with the simplest and then I'll move out from there.
Okay.
On Siren.
Sorry, really quick before we talk about the transforms itself, just like baseline Syrus start of the game, just so I understand how this
Yes.
this plays out. I boost run.
Yeah.
I move however long I want to move. This flips over as a continuous boost. I then pass turn to my opponent, and that's sort of the moment they have to diffuse this setup.
Correct.
Because it isn't giving me it isn't giving me any stats. It isn't giving me any ability to actually confirm this hit. It's just I'm relying on whatever I have in my hand to make this
Correct.
a workable attack.
Yes, that's correct. It's not giving you any extra stats on base. It's just letting you do it and then possibly get extra resources for doing it.
Okay.
You are primarily relying, in my opinion, when you're just starting out, on positioning. He is so positioning focused because you have zoned attacks, right? So you have different attacks that hit from farther away. So if you can get yourself into a spot where they can't hit you, or your attack is going to beat out theirs, either by virtue of your zoning moves or just you have an above curve range 3 option.
Right. This is at least going to probably hit, and that will confirm my continuous boost that I put down.
And not only will this hit, it hits above curve on their turn. So if
Okay.
they're at range 3, it's a speed 6. Range 3 speed curve is speed 5. So you will go faster than them unless they also have an above curve option or they EX. You'll know they EX because if you're defending, you'll see it.
Right.
As well as it's a push or pull. So if they are range specific, meaning it's at range 3, and it's sweep, you can push them out so they'll miss the sweep. Or if it's it only hits at 3 or after and you can pull them in a little bit closer. It doesn't hit for that much, but A, it will probably hit because it's faster, which is what you need to get your boosts into your gauge.
Right.
And B, it can reposition just enough to moves them, but essentially puts you out of range.
That makes sense. So when I'm doing this, and again, before we get into the transforms or anything, I'm sure that's going to change the landscape a little bit. Is your play pattern with Syrus more like, okay, run, turn it into a continuous boost, and that is my setup? Or are you ever doing like, all right, the turn has been passed to me again, parry, here's another continuous boost? Are you like upping the ante multiple times with many continuous boosts and then confirming a hit if you can?
If I yeah, I'll do more than one. If I need it to make sure that I get what if I think I have the strike connect, especially early, because if you have to take a little bit of damage for it, that's okay. But if I think I have the strike connect, I'll go for it. If I don't, yeah, I'll double down and do more instant boosts to get
Okay.
myself where I need to be.
I assume as long as the instant boosts are like good plays anyway. Like you're not
Yes,
gonna throw a parry if you're not actually trying to parry something just so you can get a continuous boost down.
correct. I would
Okay.
not do that. I'd rather have the card in my hand for that. If and I don't want to waste the moment. If I have the connect and I'm like, oh, I could play another one just to get an extra. That is me being greedy. You can do it if you want to risk it for the biscuit, but like you are risking them
Right.
repositioning or
They,
getting more resources to make it so suddenly you don't connect and you lose
right.
everything.
They do know that you have an above curve
Yes.
range 3 option. Like they're like I make it a point with older characters not to look at the kit ahead of time. Even I have heard of Title World. This is like a legendary card.
The
Um,
world.
yeah, this is like it is like literally archetypal. Like there are other cards in Exceed that are based on this. My opponent's going to know I have this. They're just going to leave. They're just going to be like, okay, I go to range 1 because you put down another instant boost. Um,
Correct.
so if they let me, or if I can use it to successfully jockey for position, awesome. But being greedy is going to make me waste value.
It is. You know you'll probably connect at 3, meaning when you pass turn, you're not too worried about, again, outside of the specific answer options or like EX or other above curve. You're not worried about them striking you and you not even being able to hit. You don't necessarily this wins a lot of strikes.
Right.
Push or pull 1 at range 3, speed 6 just wins so many things.
Yeah, there's
Um,
there's actually no normals that beat this card.
yeah, it just
Yeah,
they don't.
it's
Um,
it's actually nuts.
so you're not worried about them striking into you and you losing what you've been building. But more often than them hitting into you and you having to use that, although they might force you to show your cards, prove you have it, and use it.
Right.
But it does mean they'll probably either not strike you and then have to set up or move back in, meaning you get the turn back anyway, now with your thing already here, so you have the initiative to do what you want with your cards.
Got it.
Or you get to play out your guy. And again, you'll see, as opposed to firing this on offense, you'll see them EX on defense. And if they're EXing on defense and you're playing it on defense, that's still not fast enough with on curve because 6 to 6, you
Right.
initiate.
You'll lose the speed tie, but you have the information advantage because they've already committed the EX. You can say, okay, cool. I'll play the mix up and I'll throw sweep and hope it's not spike or something like that.
Correct. Throw
Okay.
something chunky or whatever you need to do. You also, if they end up passing back to you, you can go farther out. You can walk. You don't even like instant boosts are prime because you get the most value out of them. But pay to move, even in a guy that has so much non-pay to move, please pay to move. Just do it.
Just
I
leave.
cannot stress this enough. Just leave.
Okay.
Like if you have to pay to move, pay to move. Better than getting hit for nothing. So you can always either back out again now that you have the initiative back, or you have it back so you can throw one of your strikes, either another normal, like an on curve regular normal, or a different like attack that is on curve or you think will hit because it's passed back to you. You want to really be thinking you're using the instant boost. It's the more setup he gets, the more it becomes sort of a long-term plan. But it's a very tactical. I am moving into position so that I can get the next shot. I'm not setting up this giant thing per se at first. You are like the tide. You are moving to the next spot. And then you're like, all right, in this spot I'm winning. And then they move, you go, okay, I gotta be the tide again. And you move to the next spot. And you go, all right, in this spot I'm winning. You make a game plan. It's not a highly, like, at least at first, it's not necessarily a crazy hard game plan to get above because you're not stacked with a bunch of stats at first. But it is something that they'll have to do something about because you've put yourself into a new position that at least you should be able to win or do something about. So they can do something to counteract that, but then it's your turn. And over a long period of time, you win that.
Okay. To continue the title metaphor, you're eroding them.
Yes.
You're slowly accruing value over time, and it might not really seem like you're winning that hard. But then I look at my gauge and I look at your gauge, and you have 10 more gauge than me, and I'm not sure how that happened. And it's
Correct.
because you've been playing these sort of incremental value plays this whole time.
If we play footsies with a bunch of instant boosts and I have 3 of them out and you use 3 of them, um, if we strike and hit each other, I have 3 gauge. Sorry, I have 4 gauge. You have 1.
Right. Yeah. And that's substantial, right? Like that's many strikes worth of value, maybe not in damage, but definitely in resource gain.
Correct.
Okay.
And you don't have to do it in long because they'll either throw something at you or you were able to set up enough with the 1 or the 2, and then there you go.
Okay. So that's kind of the philosophy is I'm looking for these incremental plays, and you said a couple times at least at first, and it sounds like as I start getting these resources down, I start to snowball.
A little bit, yeah. So it's that same incremental feeling, but it gets expedited, essentially.
Okay,
So
sure.
you are doing that flow, and at the end of that, just by doing the set yourself up move, you have a giant sword to hit them with.
I got you. I got you. That was a really, really long, like 15-minute digression. After you started talking about transforms, and I sort of cut you off. I feel like we're sort of back where we were then. If you want to talk about how we progress this game plan from out of sort of phase one.
Yeah. So uh, step 1, build gauge, do your moving. As you're doing that, you want your transforms. Your transforms, they are going to make the value that you get out of doing your instant boosts and doing that charge up more. They increase the value of what you're already doing, and let you do it with more efficiency and action economy. So from least to most complicated and or importance, you have Siren's Call, whose opulence boost is your attack step hit if you have a continuous boost in play +1 power, meaning if you have any continuous boosts, either a traditional one, so if you have the light +2 speed, it's +2 speed +1 power.
Okay,
Any of them work.
and that's already pretty good, right? Like +3 power off of a fierce. The very first lesson that I had in this series was D talking to me about Akuma, and I learned very, very thoroughly how much better +3 power is than +2.
Yep.
So this is like that's a fair bit of upside, but also I'm going to be just having a lot of continuous boost in play for my ability, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct. This
this
doesn't
is
stack though. It's if you have one, you get +1. It's not
oh
+1 for each.
okay. So this actually speaks more towards that like incrementalism that you're talking about. This isn't me
Mhm.
building up an overwhelming payout. This is me winning by a little bit more. Um,
Correct.
when hopefully I'm kind of winning anyway.
Correct.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
and yeah, and again, knowing those breakpoints are really good, you can use regulars. It also applies when you use an instant boost. So your instant boost now don't just read do X, hit, add +1 power. It's do X, hit add to your gauge, and +1 power.
And +1 power. Okay. So again, I'm just kind of like gradually or again incrementally is the word I keep coming back to. Like slightly increasing the value on this strike. It doesn't have to be going over a breakpoint. If it is, awesome. But hitting for
It's
one
not
more
it's
damage
not high.
means that I'm progressing the game faster.
Correct. And you could go over certain breakpoints if they're there, if they're odd. Like, but it does just give you a little bit more throughout the whole game. It also, and I'll get to this a little bit later on, especially it interacts nicely with his flip side as well. Um, so I'm gonna go over the front and then I'll flip and then go over the transforms of the back.
Sure.
And unless I don't, and then I lied to you. But for now, that's the game plan.
That sounds good.
Uh,
Sounds good.
so yes, it just adds a little bit more, either to let you like it boosts fierce, but also it gives you that extra additional value on your tactical instant boosts. Hey, it's got extra resources on it potential, and it's got a little bit extra power. Especially since for a lot of things, especially on the front, you're trying to connect. So if you're connecting, I am sometimes willing to trade or trade down a little bit just to get my if I've got enough stuff out, I'm like, I want my resources, that's okay with me. At least in certain moments. This helps make that more less more equal or more of a trade in favor of me
Okay.
because I'll have an extra thing on top of it.
Sure. So even if I don't hit a breakpoint, hitting for one more damage means that we are. If I'm up against somebody who's got higher power than I do, and I'm trading to get value, the trades don't look quite as scary.
Yes.
Okay.
Or normals will be a little bit nicer to use at grapple range when you have nothing else.
Okay, that makes
Um,
sense.
so that's Siren's Call. Then we have let's go with this one. So this is my favorite. What I feel like to me is the most important boost, not boost, transform. Although many people have said, many people feel like it's the Aria of the Winds one. I think it depends on what is more important to your playstyle and how you like to run him. But they're both really good.
Okay.
So for Albatross Talon, and this is why your gauge is so important for you for boosts into the gauge. When you have that, you can play instant boosts from your gauge as though they were in your hand, and then seal them after they resolve.
So
So
as soon as
you're
you said that, I thought of doubling
yes,
up on reading.
you have double the readings if it's not just if you connect with focus there. It's hey, did I
If
use a focus on the
did
front
I
side and it flipped?
did I play
Did it
reading
work?
once? Can I use it again? Okay.
Yes. You played reading. Did that reading work? Now it's here.
So
You
so
can.
when does actually this is a good time to ask this, I think. When does reading resolve? At what point does
This
this
is
card
really important.
Yeah.
If reading resolves, name the normal strike. Your opponent must. Whatever you name it, you would resolve. It will flip down, and then they strike.
Oh, okay. So it isn't after the strike. It's not like during cleanup
Mm-mm.
timing or something.
No.
It's when that first sentence is over is when the boost counts as resolved. Now
Correct.
it's a continuous boost. All that stuff. If I hit, it goes over here.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it will become a continuous boost for the strike that you are using it for.
Got it. Okay. Oh, so this actually, when I asked earlier, does Cyrus have any instant boosts that cause a strike? He has one. It's reading.
It's and he can have more with the other transform. He does get a little bit faster. Um, but yes, focus will do that.
Okay. Okay. So, but other than focus, you were talking about memories from the deep. So this just doubles my value. It lets me run a whole lot more. It lets me backstep a whole lot more. It lets me tech a whole lot more. Kind of whatever
Right.
I need, right?
So many of your movement cards are so important to you, and you use them. You're in place for the strike, and then when you strike, instead of just no longer being able to use them until you get them back, they can go into your gauge to be ready for you to use at the right time. You're
Okay.
building out your arsenal of instant boosts to use for the second half of the game.
Okay.
Now, it is important to know when you use them after they resolve, they do seal. So if you are pulling it from your gauge, it's gone now. The rest of
Okay.
the game.
And
So if
he's
you
not a
want,
character like Minato who is
no,
sealing for value. Like sealing, I'm not getting anything extra from sealing them, right?
nope, just
Okay.
bad. There's nothing in his kit that says, "Yay, your cards are sealed. Here's points."
Okay.
No, no points, no money. Go to jail. That's it. So
Other than the value of playing the instant boost again, which is pretty good. Like that might be enough. I might not need something on top of it that says that I get points for sealing cards.
yeah, you don't. I do it anyway. But unlike where Minato's not going, you do go to baby jail. So keep
Yeah,
that in
okay.
mind.
Okay. So when I'm using these, you mentioned wanting to sort of save them for the second half of the game in my gauge because they are going to go away, and I have no opportunity to get them back. It, are, am I? Do I have to use this ability kind of carefully and maybe a little bit less than I'd like to because these become such a valuable resource for me?
Yeah, I wouldn't go crazy with it. Like I do it frequently, but don't just oh, this is here, I'm gonna throw it. I would throw them with a plan intent or like, hey, this is gonna execute on a good big strike. Don't just think of it as equivalent to the resources in your hand. They are more costly because they seal off and you won't get them back. Especially because if you put them in here before your first reshuffle, you're not going to draw them,
Okay.
right?
Oh,
So
sure.
like
Yeah.
it can get you more uses, but it can also be the same amount of uses just because they may not be reshuffled back in. So it is a thing to use, but it is not a thing to abuse without thought because it is more limited than just
Right.
regularly spending a card in the long
And
term.
because you are playing this sort of incremental game, and I'm looking at his power numbers, they're not unbelievable.
Mm-mm.
Um, are you frequently finding yourself reshuffling? Like, are games lasting long enough that reshuffling is something that you're probably going to do?
Yeah, I tend to reshuffle with Syrus.
Okay, so maybe before that first reshuffle, playing those boosts from the gauge is like a slightly higher opportunity cost.
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
absolutely. And also it's like you have your hand and then you also have this gauge space, right? So you don't that's like it's extra space. Like you're not always gonna be sitting at 7, but you could be sitting at a full hand and have your gauge to work with. So like you have
okay,
cards in your hand for attacks, and then you also have cards in your gauge to use for utility.
okay. So this actually kind of frees up my hand to be more aggressive with if I have these things banged. I guess they also can't parry them. Like there's a few
Nope.
upsides to it.
They know what they are, but they can't do anything about it per se.
Got it, got it. Okay,
That being said, also they do know what they are, so you are going to, if you're going to stack that, you'll just bleed a little bit more by virtue of you're going to have more cards face up than people with a very tiny gauge. Now,
right.
it's not as bad as some other characters can be in terms of bleed with having a million cards out all at once, but just something to be aware of. If they know what's in your gauge, they know it's not necessarily in your hand or it's not an EX. Most of the cards that you want to sit in your gauge, though, you're not going to typically be playing as spooky attacks anyway. So it's not a huge deal, but just something to be aware of.
And maybe once we go through all the attacks, we can talk about like what tends to sit in your gauge.
Mhm.
Um, but I can definitely see how this is going to matter for my late game when I'm setting up big attacks. I can see how this is going to be useful. Shall we also talk about
Yes.
reckless greed?
Yes. Reckless Greed. So, Reckless Greed is his speed mode. Greed for speed. So once per turn, after resolving an action that did not cause a strike, you may discard one of your boosts from play to strike. Meaning, this is his action compression. So if you did an instant boost, it becomes a continuous boost. You can then discard that same continuous boost to strike immediately. So you can go, hey, now light is not that relevant for, but like, hey, I'm going to uh retreat 4. I
And
retreat 4. I
strike
strike you.
immediately.
Same turn. I have now
Okay.
moved and attacked in the same turn. A thing that is familiar more to people now that we have Guilty Gear this season with
Action compression
cancels
all over the place.
all over the place. But especially in this season, or for characters who typically play like this, that move strike can be really hard to get. So he can be surprising in that sense of, hey, I can move and strike you, or add it and do something else. It's typically move, but I can do an instant boost, get the value out of it, and strike you, so you can be in a different space than you were expecting me to when you pass turn, without you having any forewarning that was going to happen. So they
Okay.
can never plan around passing the turn and being safe at, oh, I have a defensive answer at this range. Nope, I'm not at that range. They can never
Okay.
plan around that because you can boost though, which tends to work a lot better than having to pass turn, wait for them to either have an answer or get to be the initiator in a strike.
So I can kind of treat this like I'm a Guilty Gear, like a limited Guilty Gear
Yes.
character, where um, if I ever put down Fierce and I have this transform in play, this is a really, really active threat now. And they have to say, like, they have to get rid of this now because if they pass turn to me again, I will instant boost, move to a range that they can't deal with it, and then capitalize on this.
Right.
Okay. So a a threat accelerant that makes my stuff really scary. Um, it am I typically going to be doing it in that way where I use an instant boost, get the value out of it, it becomes a continuous boost, and that is the boost I discard? Or is it sometimes that like I don't know, like I can't imagine a situation where I would put down light and then
It's usually it is
get rid of light.
usually no, that would not be worth it.
Right.
It is usually not with like the normal continuous boosts. So his kit has 0 regular continuous boosts. So all your continuous boosts are your normals. So
Okay.
you don't usually do it with a regular continuous boost. You're typically only playing those to get the specific card's value. I won't say always, but basically always. You
Okay.
are usually doing it with an instant boost. So you play the instant boost, and then you ditch the one that you just played, or you ditch a different one if you already had one previously. But you're usually doing it with a boost that was flipped down based on his UA, both for front side and for back side. Now, whether or not you let that build, so you either have a continuous boost out already and then you do it, or you have another instant boost that you've flipped over. So it's not even a special boost; it's just another regular face down insta boost from him,
It's
and
your
you play the
character
second
ability
one.
boost.
Right, it's your character ability boost. You play a second one and then you do it. Really depends on the person. So if you want to go fast, you can go fast. You can play him a little bit more aggressive. If you want to charge up to either get more gauge or hit stronger, you can let it build a little bit, and then only in the last moment when you think your strike is, you're like, all right, this is valuable enough, or this is going to win based on what I've charged for, then you get to fire on the gun moment.
Okay.
I
Okay.
tend to play him a little bit more in the charge mode, so I don't tend to fire this all that too often unless I'm diffusing something, unless I've already got something else built up. But that is really dependent on the playstyle. If you want to be hyper aggressive, this absolutely allows you to, and it's not a bad idea. It eats your resources way faster, but it's not a bad idea. But I tend to like to confirm a hit with more payout, and then use that as my like smoking gun bullet to finish it, and having been able to finish it as a last surprise move, rather than just that's the only thing I'm doing.
Sure.
But it
Yeah.
depends on what you want.
Some Taisei, you got me doing it. Some Syrus players might be doing boost strike, boost strike, boost strike. You're doing more play neutral. When it is time to confirm the hit, you have action compression to do it.
Correct.
Okay. I noticed that this is saying after resolving an action that does not cause a strike. Boosting is not
Yep.
the only action that doesn't cause a strike.
Correct.
Changing cards, preparing, moving with the move action, all of those things work too. But for those to happen, I do need to have a continuous boost already down. So this
Correct.
isn't something that I can do all in one turn. I can't boost and then uh, change cards and then strike, for example.
With a notable exception, but in general, that is correct.
Okay.
And in general, yes. So you need, this works on anything that doesn't cause a strike. So you need a continuous boost to be in play before you can fire it. So if you want to use a different action like that, change cards and then strike, you do need to have a boost already up from a previous turn.
That makes sense. And with your playstyle of sort of jockeying in position for neutral, there's a decent chance that will happen to you, and you might
Yes.
actually be able to do that with the more rushdown Syrus line that you were describing. Probably not.
And you can they're not mutually exclusive. So your setups are going to look very similar. It is just your specific strike function, like your strike patterns, that are going to look different, switching between rushdown and more of a long-term setup. So you could do rushdown for a turn and then switch into a longer strike and then do rushdown for two strikes. Like you don't need to fully respect yourself, or again, so because he is going to do, his setup is going to look very similar either way. So you're not locked into one of these two play modes once you've started it. If at a certain point in the game it becomes better for you to switch.
That makes sense. So those are the three transforms. We haven't actually talked about his Exceed mode yet, but as we like with other Seventh Cross characters, these are important for a lot of reasons. They are important for neutral play. They're important because they discount your Exceed mode. When I'm kind of planning for my end game, how am I prioritizing these transforms? Like, what do I really, really need, and what should I like? What should I be mulliganing for? All of those considerations.
So it is either Albatross Town or Aria of the Winds that is the number one most important. Siren's Call definitely falls by the wayside a little bit. It's so good. Like, it's not falling by the wayside because it's bad. It's just the other two are awesome. It really depends on your playstyle, which one is more important. Most people that I talk to about Syrus, have told me, Reckless Greed is the most important one. Action compression, yeah, that 100%. I totally see that. In my personal experience, I tend to be more worried about getting the Albatross Town Memories from the Deep, because I really, really I find a lot of value in being able to play stuff out of my gauge. For me, if I don't have Aria of the Winds, Reckless Greed, I can still finish that game. If
Yeah.
I don't have Memories for the Deep, personally, this is going to be a lot harder.
You're going to have a lot of trouble. Okay, sure.
Yes. I also, that does come from playing, when I first started playing him, I had just, for some reason, Aria of the Winds is the easier card to get off. It is a speed 5, 2 to 5. You're on curve at 3, you're above curve and or ranged going out. I, for the life of me, when I first started playing him, just couldn't connect with this card. I don't know
You
why.
just couldn't hit the
I
card.
couldn't do it. And then I got better and I was able to do it and play with it more, but I could, for some reason, get the harder version of it online.
Sure, that's weird. I mean, maybe these are almost actually like opposite cards. Like you've got
Right.
a 5-3 versus a 3-5. Huh.
Uh-huh. I don't know why. So I when I learned to play him, I would definitely rely on the Memories from the Deep transform way more. And
Because you had it more.
I just had it more.
Right,
And
okay.
I like the long-term setup. That's how I learned to style with him.
Okay.
But if you want a more aggressive style, the Reckless Greed is definitely more important. And just having that option on there for you to go click boom is really, really good. I think it depends on how you play him. They're both really important because this gives you a huge threat and the ability to expedite. And this one gives you so many more resources and the ability to threaten with said resources.
Okay. So and you mentioned that one of these cards is harder to hit than the others, or easier to hit. Well, harder for you, or at least early on to hit, but ostensibly easier to hit than the others.
It is literally easier. I don't know what was wrong with me. Don't worry about it.
You were up against somebody who had a lot of speed dodges or something. We don't know.
Season 2 does tend to have a lot of above curve nonsense. So
You were in the Syrus mirror. You kept running into Tidal Whirl.
I can
So
pretend.
so uh all of these cards you mentioned at the very beginning of the lesson, all three of these are projectiles. So none of these in melee are super safe or particularly easy to hit. But if I am zoning and I'm playing my positioning game well, honestly, other than maybe Albatross Talon, none of these seem incredibly difficult to hit.
Albatross Island can be a little bit tricky, but the other two are pretty darn easy to get on the board, especially because Aria of the Winds is on curve or 5 at range, which is typically pretty good. So that's pretty easy to get on, just at least to get to connect. Especially because it can connect pretty easy. You can always hard transform things if you have 2 copies. But if you have 2 copies of this, you can also it EXs pretty nicely on turn 1. Because you will discard 1 copy and then you return it to your hand as part of its own after effect. Meaning if you didn't, that's an after, not a hit. So if you missed, you can get it back. So it's a little bit less risky to EX itself with.
Okay, interesting. So is this actually, we have Ryu over here as a training dummy. Is this like the precursor to Hadoken? Like this is a projectile that recurs?
Yes, but no. So you could an opening EX if you're willing to be a little bit spicy, which objectively, if you just want to hard transform it to not risk that, yeah, it's really, really important. Do that. Right. I have a lot of fun in terms of I will sometimes, but not always, so unpredictable. EX that on an opener because then it can recur itself as that Hadoken-esque, but you're not going to do it more than once because once you hit, it transforms, and you're not going to be able to do that with itself again. Now you can use it to pull your other ones back or another card back, but you can only recur. It only recurs itself with itself once.
Got it. Okay, sure. So, like in terms of confirming these hits, when I'm zoning, it shouldn't be that difficult. But also, I've had enough lessons on Seventh Cross at this point to know that like the projectile meta of the game and sort of like the general play patterns of ranged play looked kind of different back then. Like these days, everybody in the world has a fast dive. Has something to get in quickly and make projectiles harder to deal with, or make projectiles easier to deal with, rather. Mm-hmm. Syrus having 3 different projectiles that are all like this looks. I haven't really looked at the card super closely. This looks like a mid-speed projectile. This looks like a very consistent projectile. This is a fast one. that's a lot of threat at range, especially at the time, like in the Seventh Cross days. Like, so without even looking at these transforms and without even really looking at what these cards do, he's scary when he's when he's far away from you.
Mhm.
Okay.
See, this is a very interesting thing about Syrus is he is absolutely a zoner, but he is also lightly a fake zoner in a weird way. Like he is, but he loses it towards the end, and people who play him and don't who do play against him and don't play him don't realize this. So on the beginning, you do open up with 3 good projectiles, or at least regular level projectiles, that all function quite differently. So
Right.
different speeds, different levels of guard. They're going to do different things. So you have a really good mix-up for a lot of long-range options and really good mix-ups for those long-range options because they don't know if you're coming at them fast or you're coming at them with a little bit of guard, or if you're coming at them saying, "All right, you can't tank this. I'm ignoring you. I'm a weird spike."
Right.
Like they all function a little bit differently, so that adds really, really nice mix up. Even though you do kind of play them at different ranges, you're threatening them all at that long range, so they don't quite know what's coming. So in the beginning of the game, and I think this really helps because in the beginning he's purely, as we discussed, he is playing without a bunch of extra stuff on top. He's playing with my power as I move, and
Right.
I get that bonus. So you need to be able to use that early move to get. Yeah, I'm at range now, but my range game is really, really good.
Right.
Um, so you use that. So in the beginning, this is really, really strong for that without much else on top of it, especially in the earlier days when there wasn't as much to deal with this.
Okay.
And that is something important to use to capitalize on, that you have good mix ups with what you can throw really far, as opposed to most people have 1, maybe 2 projectiles. He does have 3. Uh,
Right.
Even 4 if you because your ultra costs 1. Do not throw this that early. I don't generally throw it at all, but like it's there. They don't know that it's
Right.
cost 1 game, so you have 3 to quote unquote 4, depending on if they're looking at your ultras, like different things to threaten with. Um, so it's really like it does make him quite good as a zoner early on, and a good threat there. You want to scare them as badly as possible with how much you love to be far away. You want to do this because as the game goes on, those faraway cards are your transform cards, and you want all of them. Meaning, you're going to have 1 copy of all of them out if you're doing it right at the end of during the end game phase or mid to end game phase, meaning your range capabilities drastically drop off. You're still really
Oh.
good at 3, but you'll have 1 of each out, meaning once you use 1 of them and you already have the transform up, that guy's in the discard. They know it can't be that. So
Right.
you start to dwindle fast in terms of your ranged options, or they're there, but they're more predictable. Meaning you have to make sure that you're not just going off of mix up, you're going off of, yes, other factors that I've added on land it.
Right.
I find so many people don't realize that. Like the if I can like I don't know, do what you're comfortable with, but I commit light levels of psychological warfare in terms of trying to scar people really early with how much of a zoner I am. So that when it gets to the end of the game, they sort of don't catch or might not catch right away that
Right.
you are dropping off a little bit there, at least as opposed to what you previously had access to in your kit.
Right.
Um, and so I have sometimes moved all the way the hell out to like 5 or 6 with 0 ranged options in my hand because I know they'll be more scared of it than I am, and they'll waste a bunch of things to move in on me.
Okay, so I apologize in advance for, and if anybody who watches this lesson, you've just given away a major secret about your play. But uh, even outside of uh, Koronair and their specific mind screw
I hate this.
techniques, um, this is something like I feel like almost everybody who's a zoner, other than people like Ryu who can recur their projectiles, are kind of like a part-time zoner,
Mhm.
because half my deck hits in melee range because everybody has the normals. Um, but Syrus even more so. Like early in the game, I'm able to sort of back up that threat. Later on,
Not as much.
I can't do it as much. Is that if they do call that, if they do just hang out at range, am I occasionally then just using my run, my run, instant boost, continuous boost, discard, continuous boost, now I strike, to run in and fight them in melee now?
You could. It depends on the person. If they can't beat you at range, and they're just like, fine, we'll sit here. I won't spend the resources to get there because you can't hit me. That's fine with you. You get more value out of sitting there instant boosting and charging than they do typically. So
Okay.
if they decide not to do anything, you can benefit off of sitting there and charging up a little bit. Or just, all right, you want to give me the time to go get my ranged option? Sure, okay, I'll go get it. Like,
I
shoot.
will eventually kill you if you sit here long enough.
Right.
It just might not be as threatening as I was at the beginning. Okay, that makes sense.
Correct. And if they can beat you, then you might want to move in a little. That being said, you love 3, so like a little. It's not that much.
Right.
And usually, if they come in a little, like usually what will happen is I go farther than I need to because they'll chase me and end up at 3 because they don't want to waste so many resources. I'm like, yeah, that's where I wanted to be the whole time. And hey, look, it's my turn now.
Got
Like,
it.
if I want to be at 3, I'll go farther because they'll follow me in.
Right.
And
Okay.
I'm
Sure.
threatening larger things.
And you can
Uh,
and you can back up that threat at least in the early game so that it's not empty, right? They actually do need to chase you. Okay. Sure.
100%. It's not empty. It's not empty at the end either as much. You have some, just not as much. But like at the beginning, it is 100% an onslaught of ranged moves.
Okay.
So you wanna really enforce that feeling as much as possible because it will benefit you for them to be in the mindset that 3 is good enough, but long range is not.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Uh,
So
Also,
so
you having your cards not hit at 1 also really enforces that feeling to other people that you are a zoner. Um, because I mean, you really hate 1, but like 2 and 3 are totally fine for you. But if you've spent the whole game running away from them and they're coming in, that like because you don't have that really, really, really close option, that also adds to that. I find.
right, it's a classical conditioning model. Like
Yes.
you are they're a dog chasing a car.
Uh huh.
Okay, I get you. So we are like learning about Syrus. We're learning about Exceed play patterns, and also like low key throwing shade at our opponents. I'm into it,
Maybe.
maybe a little bit. Coronair's
You have to
opponents,
be logical.
you know who you are. That's really funny, actually. Okay, so fast projectile. Should we also talk about these as attacks, or at this point, are we still talking mostly about the engine pieces that we're looking for?
We can talk about them as attacks just because we're talking about them here. They're
Okay,
still going to function as separate engine pieces when we do the flippy mode, but we can just talk about attacks in general a little bit here.
sure.
Um, Especially these 3, I think. Um, so yeah, this is just it's on its face. Speed 5, 2 to 5, so you can throw it close if you want to. I don't usually, but it's good to have the. I find that extra inner range there is nice in case they move in, so they
You
can't walk in on you freely.
they couldn't. You throw this at range 4. They assault in or something
Right.
like they dodge it. This actually can catch a lot of things that would move them closer, even at
Correct.
even pretty fast.
And by having that, exactly what you just said, by having this, which says, hey, at range 4, if you assault in to go faster than Siren's Call and get out of range, you can't do that freely because it could be Arya instead. You're not really playing it to hit assaults, but the existence of this as a threat at the same time makes Siren's Call easier to throw in without them running.
That makes sense. When you're using the after, you mentioned there being a specific use case where you're EXing it and getting the other copy back. Other than that, are you just like, all right, what's the best card in my discard pile? And then you just go and find that?
Yeah, pretty much. I
Okay.
look at, hey, what do I want right now? I'm gonna put that back in my hand.
Okay.
Did I
And
miss something important? Do I now have? It's nice because you can get the second if you didn't wait for to have 2 copies of a transfer in your hand because you can't wait sometimes. Like ideally, you get 2, you hard transform it. But if you can't and you're gonna throw it and you miss, this can get you back one of your copies of your transforms to match either because now you have it back. So you're openly threatening a long range move they can't call with focus.
right.
Um, that now can match up to something else. Like having these is and them knowing while you have the other ones live as well is a nice threat. And or you can take it to match with another copy of it you have in your hand.
Sure. And other than those dynamics, it occurred to me while you were talking, like many of the things that would normally be in my discard pile if I was playing another character, if I'm doing my game right, will be in my gauge instead. So like ideally, I won't even have an opportunity to go get crossback because it's either going
No,
to be here
really
or
engage.
because I hit it, or it's going to be here because I boosted it and then hit with something else. So like I'm looking at a card that has a continuous boost on it that I'm not going to be playing to go to gauge very often when I'm boosting it. That's really high value. If I don't have any better plans, should I just go get sweep? Basically.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
Sweep's great. You
All
can
right.
also hey, did you miss your focus? What if you had focus again?
What if
Cyrus
I
loves focus.
what if I had focus again? And also, I mean, like these two cards that we mentioned, like I was sort of joking here, but the two cards that we just mentioned are also like two of the best range one cards in the game. And I have
Uh-huh.
a really pronounced weakness at range one. Maybe I want these.
Yeah.
Okay.
You do have to keep in mind though, if you're taking if you're taking a normal, if they have reading available.
Right.
So that is the offset of taking a normal and not in special. You'll most oftentimes grab a special or an ultra because that's a lot of your discard pile, and they tend to be pretty high value. And or you're grabbing it for an attack, but grabbing a normal because it's what you need because you need range one cards,
Sure.
or they have the continuous boosts that don't add themselves to the gauge or are beloved reading.
Sure.
um
And
is not a
and
bad move.
and this is fast enough that you might conceivably occasionally be able to throw it on defense and get it back and have it going into your turn. You can throw reading on your turn or something like that. Like
Yeah.
if you can probably finagle a way to dodge a reading if you have to, but the threat of a reading with a known normal is a scary enough thing that you should be careful.
Hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. What about Siren Call as an attack?
Siren Call, it's good. It's the 6, so it's lets you go farther out and adds 6 to your threat range. 5 is better for you because you've threatened them all, but it does add 6 onto your range that you can stand at, especially if you're not standing there because you want to throw an attack. You're standing there because you want them to come into range 3. I don't know, because if you're at 6 and you move in 3 spaces with, say, run, you're
Run.
at 3 now. So you can threaten at 6 without them being like, well, you moved to 6 and that doesn't do anything. And having to stand at 5 till they'll run in, you can stand at 6 till they'll run in. So that's
I
really nice.
I love that your play pattern is based partially on the fact that Exceed players really hate inefficiency and they would never ever ever run in 2 spaces. They're always going to run in the full 3.
Yeah, let's be real.
That yeah, no, I've listen, you if we were playing right now, after you told me that, I would still run in the full 3. I
You
can't
can't
help
not
it.
do it. You can't not do it.
That's so funny.
Um, so it's nice to have that extra range because you can outzone other projectiles. Um, you can threaten at 6. It is also a project. I find this is a projectile smacker. Because it's got a little bit of guard on it. It's not super fast, but it's got that 4 guard. So and it's 3 to 6, right? So this is your projectile that you throw either because they've got nothing yet far out, or if they have a projectile, hey, I can tank it. I can hit back. I can get value out of that. It'll And this I find sometimes annoying because there's a good amount of the time that I don't want the after effect to actually function. But if if you're in second half mode and you've used up your range up, your transforms are all out, you've used up one of them, maybe 2 of them, you're actually out of your own stuff, it does pull them into 2. I wish it pulled them into 3. I really think having that 2 there is a little bit, but it actually resets you in closer. So his own kit kind of knows what happens. So
Right.
this is your anti-projectile.
Okay. And in the early game, when I am sort of more of a full-time zoner, that actually might be a detriment because
Yes,
unless they are like way scarier than I am at range, I probably don't want them close up. But
that's
later
fair.
on when I'm running out of ranged options and I'm ready to kill them with normals or something, this is okay.
Yep, and everything you have does hit at 2. So technically, two is everything except for this own itself and the one ultra.
Right.
Technically, 2 is the most favored range in terms of totality of what your options are.
If I was
find
wild
them to be
swinging, I would
3.
want to be at 2, for example.
Correct.
Okay, sure.
But and putting them at 2, it's a nice reset because if you don't have other ranged options in your hand because you've run out of them, or you just don't have them yet, it puts you back into range of all of your other cards. So it puts you in range of Treasure Hunter, it puts you in range of your Symphony of the Deep, it puts you in range of Albatross Hound, which of your projectiles, that is the guy that you throw close. Those
okay.
two, Siren's Call, Aria of the Deep, you definitely want to be way far out. Albatross Hound, you can for sure be way far out. It does give them the ability to run in, especially if they're calling this guy over the other guys, because if you're at 5, if they throw a dive, you will still be in range. But like if you're at 4 or less, they can just dive over you. Like they've got a lot of time being at range 3, speed 3, to either hit you with a projectile, another projectile, because you only have 3 guard,
Right.
or run back in over you, which maybe you'll still get it, but now they're close, which can kind of suck, or dodge it. Either direction. So it is good at range if you think it will get there, but it's also good at 2. Like it's a cross catcher is what it is, right? Because it's range 2, guard 3. If they cross out, which either they think they're dodging something else, or they want to be zoned on you for whatever reason, you still
You
you
win the
still
strike.
get
You win the strike pretty hard at that point.
correct.
Is
You beat everything except for assault and dive, which typically dive will miss you at 2, and assault is cheeky at 2.
People in the same way that Exceed players sometimes have difficulty only closing 2 spaces with run. Range 2 assault is like
I
that's
feel bad.
that's some intermediate Exceed. Like that's after you've watched all of the episodes of Excess Exceed, then maybe you can throw range 2 assaults. But that's not what we teach people in Exceed Ed, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It is intentionally under speed curve. You would have to be doing.
Right.
So what is in my brain when I'm thinking about that is are they a mid-level player who doesn't know to sometimes go under the speed curve? Okay, great. They're not going to do that. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Are they an advanced player who I think might call that out? Okay, I have to take into consideration, do I think that's what their response will be? Is that what their options they have left?
Right.
And then consider whether or not I want to do it. Or if they're a really, really new person, hey, they might do it on accident. Don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really new people are more likely to do that because they don't know better.
I've definitely been on both the giving and the receiving end of the ultimate new player mix up. So this is like ignore guard is cool, right? Like I'm way into having a range 2 to 5 effectively spike. That's awesome.
It's really nice. It's a closer spike, so you can get, you have a threat spike at 2, which is I find I'd rather throw this at 2 than 3. I like it far. I like it 2. I don't like it 3 as much. Because 3 are more likely to get assaulted or dived, and those are the 2 things that this loses to. And then it beats cross won't hit you, and everything slower than it will usually beat, because things don't typically have more than 5, don't typically have 5 plus guard. So not guard, armor. So
right, yeah.
Focus has 2 armor, so it's not going to take all of it, but it will stun focus, it'll stun sweep, it'll stun spike. So it stuns usually anything that it's its speed or slower if you initiate, and it will get cross. It just loses to assault and dive, things that are off at 2. So I wouldn't throw it at 3 unless you have something else going on. 3 is or you're being cheeky, like you're doing a regular spike, you know.
Right.
It's a regular spike mix up at 3. It's a little bit better on an at 2 on that if you don't think they're going to call that, or longer.
Right. When you're at that range 3 to 4 area, does having Aria of the Winds and Siren Call provide some cover, or
Yes, it does.
And so it is a mix up, right? It's a legitimate thing that you can play. Like when you say you're being cheeky, there's a possibility that you are, because you do have these cards that say, hey, don't assault into me, don't dive into me, because these are going to beat it. But it sounds like even with that providing cover, you prefer the use case of playing it at 2 or 5, like the extreme ranges of the attack.
For me, I find it important enough that either 2 or 5 or hard transform it.
Okay.
But or I have something else like a light or something. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, I forgot that this is also your favorite transform. So you really want to confirm this.
I really like that card.
You don't really like, even though you have cover, if they just are like, well, I'm gonna dive, knowing that it could be either of these two, you just lost a lot of value by whiffing this. You really don't
Right.
want to. Okay, sure.
And people who don't have any ranged attacks all have dive. Like a lot of
Right.
people will be like, I have nothing else. Guess I might as well throw this one.
Right.
Um, and like dive is great for teching important continuous boosts, but with Syrus, he
Oh, you don't
doesn't have
have any.
right. You have a lot of like you have a lot of continuous boosts, but they're all not individually important most of the time.
Right.
So like,
You don't have swift destruction. You don't have uh Way of the Warrior on Ryu over here. So like they're saving, if they're saving their tech, it's probably for like light, which is scary, but
right.
it's not any scarier than something they have.
Correct. And they really want to get in. So like I have seen a lot of people will throw dives and attack because they're not waiting if they know better. They're not waiting on like a big scary thing here because you usually are using you really need your normals for range 1.
Right.
Um and you they really want to move in, so they're like, all right, unless it's Arya of the if they're initiating, unless it's they will at least move in on Siren's Call, if not dodge it, or move in or dodge on Albatross Talon
Right.
as well at
And
4.
this is sort of the counterpart to your psychological warfare from earlier. Like you've impressed on them that they are a zoner, and they're like, all right, cool. Well, I'll have to dive in at some point to keep pressure on you, and you've inadvertently turned off your favorite card by doing that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Um, that is the cost there. Dive is it's exactly what you said. Dive is relatively cheap as a card because tech isn't that strong against any individual card. It can be strong at slowing down like a little, but there's nothing that in particular that you're like, I need to tech this thing from being out, and you really want to move in. So it is a lot easier to throw against Syrus than I would say people like Ryu.
That makes sense. So those are my projectiles. It sounds like they provide cover from one another, but really they actually do have pretty unique use cases, and I'm using them for specific things in addition to just having a lot of threats at range. Um,
What I mean by like you have a lot of projectiles that feel like they're really like you have a really high mix-up level, but you're not using them for the same things in actuality.
yeah, okay. Um, from here, should we talk about the rest of his attacks and the rest of his kit, or should we transition back into talking about sort of the overall game plan and what we're doing with all this gauge?
We can go for the rest of the attacks, not their boosts. The boosts I think we need to flip first. But
Okay.
so for Treasure Hunter, Treasure Hunter I think is his least valuable card. It's this is like a lot of things that Cyrus has. By virtue of it existing, it does add value. It's a range 2 hit push 1 to 2 hit push 3. So by having an option that hits at 1, that is helpful. And having a push 3 that's speed 4 means you can push out sweep and or spike if it's at 2. You can push out slow ranged cards that don't that are as long as don't say you can't move me. If they're going slow and chunky or mid speed, you can get them to A, far away from you, which is what you want, and B, you can just dodge it. Like you don't have to tank through anything. You don't have to break guard because you don't hit super hard. You can threaten to push them out 3 spaces at 1 or 2, which is really nice. It also feels really bad because they discard a card from their gauge and you add the top card of your discard pile to your gauge. So you get extra 2 gauge off of a card instead of 1, and they lose a gauge, so it's a net +3 there. And, and
That's pretty brutal.
yeah, and anytime people have to discard gauge, um, involuntarily, it makes them feel bad. Like that's what I've seen. If you spend a gauge, okay, that's fine. I spent it to win this strike.
Right.
If you made them spend a gauge, they feel bad.
Yeah,
So,
there are not many characters. I was talking to Koronair prior to this lesson starting. I've done I think 89. This is my 89th Exceed lesson. I think I've come across 2 characters who make you discard gauge, and they're both sadists. One is Eno and one is Natali. Um, and I guess Cyrus has a mean streak in him.
uh, I'm gonna say nothing, flip to the back of the card, and then flip back to the other side of the card, and
Okay.
then we can continue.
No, he's a good boy. Don't worry about it.
He's a
All
real
right,
good boy.
so this is a sort of classic positioning mid speed. I'm going to push out sweep. I'm going to set up my zoning stuff. Um, but you've talked about it like it's kind of like his least exciting card or his least consistent card. Is it just because it's quote unquote like just a mid speed?
Yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot of coverage for this card that is not like a regular normal because most of his stuff wants to be. You really want to be at 3, so you oftentimes don't want to be that close in the first place. And your other options, you typically like to play, except for maybe Albatross, but like you like to play farther out. So it's if you initiate like it's hard to initiate with Syrus in melee range, and so it can be really obvious what you're doing if you're doing that, because A, you don't have that many options, and B, you have so many insta boost options. Like your ability to do something else that's not striking on your turn unless you've moved and striked, um, is so high that just staying there and throwing that, I find can be really obvious, at
Okay,
least in my experience with it. Like it's a fun card. It's
right.
just I don't find often, like in the actual game when I'm playing it, I find it sticking around in my hand more often than not. And usually having it at least one copy up to like threaten that you could do it or call something out pointedly, um, is
It kind of dissuades
more
them.
effective. Yes.
Okay.
Or I'm using it as the finisher of a big long combo.
Okay. It also occurs to me if you're standing at range 2 and they're playing to beat Albatross Talon, they're kind of playing to beat Treasure Hunter too. Like these
Yes.
things kind
You
of cover
can
like
beat them both.
this beats sweep and focus, this beats sweep at range 2. Um it like and hey, both of these things lose to that range 2 assault. Um
Yeah.
so this is sort of becoming like these are the opposite of a mix up basically. Like if they're playing to beat one, they're beating the other.
Correct.
So
You're a
so
little
you
bit vulnerable to mid speeds with both of them.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily need that kind of coverage, despite it being a maybe a good card in a vacuum.
In a vacuum, it's a great card. It's just not. I don't find it to be very playable unless I've set something up where I'm like, you know what this is, you just can't do anything about it. Um, otherwise, I don't end up throwing it too much unless I am proving that I will do it. But that
Okay.
again, that's a different
Yeah,
story.
to again, psychological warfare is a big part of Exceed.
Yeah, and he is a siren. Like Cyrus, he wants to lure you in with the pretty, and then he goes angy.
Oh,
Like that's kind of his vibe. Like quite literally.
that makes sense to me. Okay, so and
Um,
we sort of already talked a little bit about Tidal Whirl as just like a no
delicious.
frills
It's
really
great.
good card.
It's awesome. Don't use both of them. The moment you use you've used it twice. It's unless it's really important. The value you lose out of using your second copy of Tidal Whirl, as opposed to holding your second copy of Tidal Whirl, so they have to worry about, oh god, what if I get Tidal Whirled?
Right.
It's really high. It's an amazing card. It wins so many things. Um, that's the only thing I would note about it is because it's so high value as a get out of jail free card. Don't use it on. I don't typically use it on offense unless again I'm diffusing like a whole bunch of boost nonsense. Um, because it's way better on defense. And uh, yeah, so it's way better as a defensive card. You only have you have 2 copies. They will come back around in your discard. It will be in your gauge, but you can spend it out if you want to. You can recur it with this guy. But you're not going to do as much recursion on Tidal Whirl as like your instant boost recursions, even though it is a great target for Aria of the Winds because hey, I'm threatening you openly with the Tidal Whirl in my hand now. I've told you I had it.
Right.
You can't attack me on curve at range 3 now unless you're calling that I won't play it, and you can't call it out of my hand unless you're smacking it out of my hand. You can't reading it.
Right.
But just be careful once they're gone. You no longer have that range 3 above curve pressure.
Okay, so this is in a similar way to like whenever a character has like a command grab, like a range 1 spike kind of thing. Actually, very similar to what you said about Treasure Hunter. Like
Mm-hmm.
the threat of this card means that you're getting value out of it. if they disrespect it, then you use it to make them respected. Otherwise, congratulations, you're holding a card that says your opponent can't play assault or
Yep.
spike or sweep or dive or any other card at range 3.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that's not to say never use it, because if you never use it, then it loses its power. But like, don't be frivolous with it, because it is so nice.
Right. Try to figure out how afraid your opponent is of it and adjust accordingly.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes sense. So those are
And
the
then,
specials. I'm sorry, go
mhm.
ahead.
No, go ahead. And
No,
you're going where I think you're going.
I was gonna ask you whether we were transitioning to the ultras or whether we were transitioning to boosts or what.
We can go to the ultras. So I don't throw them that often, if at all. One of my favorite things about season 2 is their ultras are oftentimes super cheap or
Yeah,
crazy expensive, but usually super cheap. Look at these: 1 gauge, 2 gauge. You know
yeah,
why? Because your gauge is everything to you. You have instant. If it's in your gauge and it's an instant boost, it's a whole nother card option in a whole nother ballpark.
right.
So you're not gauge hungry in the sense that you spend a lot of gauge, but you're a little bit gauge hungry in the sense that having a lot of gauge gives you a lot of options and you like to have it.
You want to hoard
Um,
it.
yes, you're hoarding your shiny pile of gold.
Yeah, yeah.
More like a monster.
You wanna make a big pile of gauge and then fall asleep on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's a
and
treasure hunter. Look at
yeah,
this. He wants his
yeah,
treasure.
totally. And so even though this is 2 gauge or 1 gauge, like 1 gauge is for some characters, 1 gauge is essentially free, right? 1 gauge
Mhm.
means that you are replacing a 1 force card in your gauge with a 2 force card in your gauge when you play it. For Syrus, like if if these are two of my second copies of a transform, so that they don't have instant boosts on them,
Yeah.
all right, maybe
Is
then
it
I can play them.
Is it a continuous boost, or does it have a transform on it? Yeah, you don't care about it. Get that shit out of here. If
Okay,
it's a instant boost, that's a different story.
yeah, okay, sure,
Um, yes. Also, Dredge Fury is a one cost boost. It's a one cost ultra, but you really, unless you're like, you really need an extra long range card as a like a finisher, or just a you really need that in that right moment. It's really going to be more than 1 gauge. It's before spend up to 3 gauge for each gauge spent plus 2 power, and instead of discarding 1 card display, add it to your hand. So you do still use that gauge, but you get 1 card back, which is nice. There's actually so much recursion, which is lovely.
yeah,
Um, Welcome to the graveyard, my friends. Um, but he you are spending. You want to, if you can, like you're spending up to 4 gauge to play it, even
right,
though you're not functionally spending the resource value of 4. You're spending the gauge value of 4, which for you, gauge is worth can be worth more in terms of how much you can do with it. Also, especially if you have 4 non insta boosts in your gauge, okay, cool, that doesn't hurt as bad. Or if you have 3 and then you put one of those instant boosts of your choice back into your hand, that's really nice too. That's also fine. But most of the cards in your gauge are going to have boosts on them, because that's, hey, look at your front side. That's what puts them there.
right.
Um,
So unless if you do have 4 instant boosts in your gauge, and you throw Dredge Fury with the intent of getting one of them back, and you have Albatross Talon transformed, really the only thing that you're getting out of it is the opportunity to throw the thing that you recurred as an attack, right?
Correct.
You could have boosted it anyway. You could have changed cards with it. You could have moved with it. Everything else was available to you in gauge, so it had better have been a good attack. And like
Yes.
looking at the cards that looking at the instant boosts that I might have wanted to recur, I can see some opportunities to throw some of these. Like some of these I could, yeah, I might want an assault again. I might need a focus for a range 1 play. Like it could happen, Title Whirl. But
Mhm.
the like I'm really only worried about that if I need to throw the attack, it sounds like.
Yes. You can also be nice in terms of, hey, even more reading. Like if you pull reading out of your gauge, that means you can play it as a boost and then put it back into your
Oh,
gauge
so
again, or cycle it more.
I don't have to seal it when I play it from gauge or
Yeah.
something? Okay.
If you want even more recursion, that is another option that makes you not seal it, which
Okay.
is nice.
Okay.
Um, but it goes up to 8, which is nice because it's +2 for each of the 3. So you can get up to 8, and then you can add a little more nonsense to make that hit really, really hard. So if you're hitting stupid hard, great. But otherwise, you have to spend all that gauge. Like if you only spend 2 of the 3, it's only a 6 damage hit for 3 gauge.
Right.
Which is not nothing, but I find it's better as a final finisher, or if you need a very weird specific recursion that you don't have, you can do it for that. Or like a get out of jail button there. I didn't even get out of jail, but like a very specific answer that can be there. But I don't usually plan around playing this card regularly. I typically play it either as a massive finisher or not at all, especially because man, that boost. We'll talk about it in a second, but man, that boost is so good. It's so good, and it's a trap, and I love traps. I don't know if you've noticed over the course of these last minutes, but by God,
I can extrapolate from previous things that you've said on this lesson, Koronair, why you might enjoy a trap.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't throw his ultras that often for that reason, but they're not bad ultras. Like they can be really good. Just I tend to find they're better off being used for other things.
Okay.
Not as force, but for other reasons.
Okay. And what about Symphony of the Deep? So first of all, it's a DP, which is cool. Like I'll take an above curve range 2 option.
Yeah, especially because you don't have a lot of on curve range 1 options either.
Oh yeah, this is also just basically a more expensive grasp when I'm at range 1. That's fine too.
Yeah, it's kind of really nice for you.
What am I making of this hit effect though?
So your hand's empty. Welcome to your hand's not empty anymore. Did you lose something important? It's in your discard pile. Have you run yourself out of cards? Because, hey, you were going rush mode? You were doing fast, Syrus. You're out of cards now. You need stuff back. You need specific things back that are gone. Welcome to your hand exists again. It's a DP that's fast. It's almost guaranteed to hit. It's really nice for when you want to connect for his front side ability. So you're like, hey, I've got enough gauge to fire it. I'm going to get that gauge back and more because I've got some face down transforms here with his UA. This is range 2, speed 7 is almost always going to hit unless you're in... unless you're also in Season 2 and you're on offense, there are other eyes. But, like...
Sure.
Or at least 3. But generally, you're going to hit. Like, if you know they don't have an answer for that, you know. So that's going to be almost a confirmed hit every time you want to throw it. On offense or on defense for range 2. Unless they EX, and again, you'll see it. And then you're going to be able to get all your hit effects off. You're going to be able to recharge your hand, which is really, really nice. It stops them from being able to... Like, it is a threat in the sense because you're usually sitting on a bunch of gauge. Now you want to hoard your pretty little gauge. But they don't know that. And, like, you can spend it if you need to. So you're sitting with this threat of being able to stun out something that shouldn't be able to be stunned out. You can connect if you need to put a bunch of cards from your boost section into your gauge. You can refill your hand if you need to. Syrus also typically, it's random, but he randoms really nicely because, again, a lot of your cards are going to not end up in your discard pile in the first place because unless you whiff, most of your instant boosts are going to end up in your gauge. So a lot of the cards that end up in your discard pile are going to be things you spend out of gauge, so things with transforms on them or things with continuous boosts on them or like regular attacks. Right. So your discard pile is typically filled with goodies.
And at least 2 of the things in my discard pile I will have chosen when I play this card because I'm validating from gauge. I can put my 2 best things in from gauge and put them in discard, and that gives me better odds of getting something good.
Yep, and getting both something good and something that you want. Like he has, you can see it with Dredge Fury, and you can see it with Symphony here, and the other way. He has such a great way of getting the specific thing that he wants. Like you're really good at getting to the place what you want and then grabbing the thing that you need. That's, hey, this is really good against this person and really good in this specific position. Like he can recur specific cards fairly easily, so you're not like Tidal Wall is a little bit much, but like you're not strongly overpowered in base, but you can have the thing that you want when you want it if you know what you want to get and you know how to function with that. So being able to throw those into your discard pile, you'll get a bunch of nice things. You'll probably get one if not both of the things that you want because you're filling your hand up to 7. And unless you have a full hand, you get a lot of cards off of that usually.
Yeah. So, I mean, just in terms of potentially drawing, 5 to 7 cards alone, that sounds incredible. It, you gave me a lot of upside when you described this card. It sounds like you don't play it super often, though.
I don't like the. Well, I'll play it if they've managed to outrun me and or end up close. Then yes, but like I like to be at 3 because I find I've got a lot of different threats on the board. For 3 is his like sweet spot. So if I'm at 3, this just won't hit. And this guy gets you 2 3. So like his boost there, the boost on this repositions you to the spot where you want to be. So I don't find it's like it's really really good, but it's not as fun as the Dread Fury boost, but it is still quite a good boost to use. His boost lets you use the like you can play it on the front side and then go and have it in your gauge, be ready to play it again. Also, once it's in your gauge, as you've seen from so many of his cards, his gauge is his boosts to play again. His gauge is also kind of a card select for attacks if you have a turn to set up too. So like once it's here, you can, if you really need it, try and pull it back into your hand.
It could be anywhere, right? Like if it's in your gauge, it basically is just like it's one attack away from being in your hand if you need it to be.
So I tend to use it as a boost more often, just because using it as a boost doesn't lock me out of playing it as an attack in the same way that it does for
Hmm.
other characters,
Okay.
as well as it is just a strong value as a boost. So because it's really good by base, but it's also kind of situational when you want to run it because um you're going to want to either be tricking something out or confirming something or refilling, but it just to do damage that doesn't do much.
Right.
So if I have the situation when I want it, I can try and pull it out to use it. And if not, in most situations, the boost on it is helpful.
Okay. That makes sense. So you'll use it when your opponent makes you. You'll use it when you have the perfect opportunity to. You'll use it as a boost and then get it back if you need it later on because you can do that
Mhm.
because you're Syrus. But it isn't. It isn't. Neither of these altars are your game plan. You aren't building up for a payout with these cards.
No. Or you've picked one because it's in your hand at that moment rather than pre planning, all right, I've got to build my entire game plan around when this gets to my hand. It's
Right.
you're building a game plan around the threat that you have at the time rather than anticipating one of them entering your hand.
Okay, that makes sense. So like contrast again. Our training dummy over here. I can see a situation where Ryu is like, all right, when am I going to draw Metsushori Ken? I
Right.
have the gauge for it. I'm ready. Cyrus isn't really treating his ultras like that.
No, because you are either functioning around what you have currently, if that's whatever threat you have in your hand that works, or hey, what threat works? Is it in my gauge or is it in my discard for me to be able to recur? Like you can get the specific one that you want. So you
Right.
really want to shift that based on who you're fighting and what cards are out. Like card counting with Cyrus is huge.
Okay.
Um, so they're really good. Like he does not play things because they're bad, but he doesn't. I almost think it applies to everything here. Off the top of my head, he doesn't play certain things a lot because it's not he doesn't have a this is my answer and this is my always go to. It's what works now.
Right.
Everything works as an instant boost except for the transforms. Well, as an instant boost, what of these attacks and or ultras do I need for this person in this moment?
Right. That makes sense. So yeah, you're being way more flexible. There isn't like a Cyrus line that you are trying to commit to
Yeah,
with your ultras.
there's ups and downs of the attacks, but the boosts are always good. And if you know you've got one and you don't want to use it, you can be like, all right, gonna do a bit, build up a lot of power and a lot of movement into Dredge Fury or into Symphony of the Deep. You can definitely do that. You just don't necessarily need to pick those cards as the deliverer for that.
Okay. Sure. That makes sense. Okay. So those are my attacks. Um where to next?
Um, I think we go for the back and then we'll go back into the boosts on them.
Sure.
So this is the front. So obviously you instant boost, you put it face down, hit add to your gauge. The back side of Cyrus when you transform, um, you typically want to transform when you have at least 2 of your transforms up because you like your gauge. Also, you're probably not ready. Like I actually take it in addition to just not wanting to spend gauge as a sign that I'm ready to hit go mode on the back that I have 2 transforms up. Um,
Enough of the game
if
has progressed.
Yes. So the back doesn't gather as much. So when he exceeds, notable thing here is that you have a now effect, essentially. You add your continuous boost to your gauge. So if you've been stacking continuous boosts running back and forth, and you don't think you have a way to confirm it, or they give you a moment for that, you can just transform to add all of those boosts to your gauge instead of
Okay.
having to hit them.
And odds are most of like if I have a lot of continuous boosts, most of them they're not going to be light and fierce and defend. They're going to be hit, add this to your gauge. This says I hit even though we didn't strike.
Cards that typically you have a higher value being in your gauge because they're instant boosts who you want to use for their instant boost powers by virtue of Albatross Talon or by virtue of their good cards that you want to recur. So
Right.
they have more value in the gauge than they do as a face down continuous boost that says hit add me to your gauge.
Right, sure. I will have gotten all of the value of hitting out of exceeding in that case. Sure. Okay.
So that's a way to get things in safely, or if you have a big stack, especially if you're like, I really want this card not to get whiffed.
Right.
And his UA becomes after resolving an instant boost, put it into play as a face down continuous boost that reads now +1 power, move up to 1. And this, unlike Siren's Call, stacks. So for every continuous boost that you have put into play from this ability, now it's not going to be on top of, like, it's an add +1 to light. It's you used a continuous boost, it's now face down. But all of his UA things, instead of hit at the gauge, are hit +1 power, are +1 power.
Yeah. So
And
suddenly Memories from the Deep is reading +1 power, is tech +1 power, is parry +1 power, whatever I need.
right. Or if you've moved back, if you moved, they move, you moved, they move. Now you have 3 boosts, so now you're where you want to be and you have 3 power. Like you can charge by continuing to play footsies with them.
Okay.
Which can get really scary, especially because with Siren's Call, even just 1 out is +2 power. You do an instant boost, you now have +2 power.
Oh yeah. Okay. So this is where sneakily it comes back in and becomes much more relevant. Is now I have a way to add my add more damage to easy to confirm attacks, of which I have like 1, 2, 3. I don't know, probably 4 and 5. Like I've got plenty of ways to land power.
Right. So you have a lot of sneaky power in that can keep stacking up if they don't have a way to deal with you, or if their way to deal with you doesn't have the action compression, so they pass it back to you. Either you get to fire and hit them with it, or you go, okay, I gotta do something else now? That's fine. All right, I have the advantage again, and another power added on. Like, just by the process of me removing to where I needed to be, or where we just were, I have now gotten scarier.
Right.
And I'm less likely to run out. Like, if we're going on a roar of resources, hello, Treasure Hoard, I have more resources, probably.
Sure, yeah, because I've spent the first half of the game building up this gigantic pile of gauge that I can use as instant boosts over and over again. Okay. So, and when I have Reckless Greed in play, I have action compression, but that involves me discarding a boost. Oh no, my +1 power. But this does just turn me into Ulrich, right? Like I get move up to 1 now strike plus whatever instant boost I just got. That's actually quite strong all on its own.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. It's move 1 strike, which is fantastic. And then you don't have to pick the same thing you just used too. So if you have more than 1, you can still have that extra power in play or that extra ability in play. Or if you don't, move 1 strike is just really, really nice.
Sure.
A notable thing for this that I loved is, I keep going back to him, but Syrus's reading is so good. You read, you move, then they have to do set their card. So you get to move on reading.
Oh wow, yeah. So okay, so I can play that read sweep back up to range 2 and then throw spike or something like that.
Yep. Or back up to range 3, then you have Tidal Whirl.
Tidal
you have a lot of things. Like you can initiate reading from a space away from where you want to be, them ending their turn. So they don't want to get read at range 3 or during your turn. They have to be 2 spaces out.
Yeah. You have like fuzzy ranges. They don't want to be at range 3, but also if you're at range 2 or range 4, you can be at range 3 with reading. So they don't want to be anywhere.
So you can initiate a strike with any instant boost with Aria. You can initiate a rating with Focus. Um, it's super nice. You can just to set yourself into going into things. Also, just to play off of that, if you're throwing parry, you parry. It goes on this side. It will go to your gauge to get ready for later. You flip over it. You then know what's in. I'll parry things that I don't think are in their hand. I try not to make it that obvious, but like because I just want to see their hand because by God my reading is incredible. Also
Right.
my reading if can go to my gauge so I can be sitting there with the threat of hey what's in your hand I'm gonna throw this now you can't get the reading out of my hand because it's in my gauge.
Right. Okay.
Um
And you've lost the ability at this point to reading get reading in your gauge, send it back. So like you needed to have hit somehow, hit with focus or played a reading
and then put
earlier
it
in
in
the game in order to make that work. But that's doable, right? Like these are good cards that you could, this is a good boost, this is a good card. You can just do that.
right, you can just do that.
Okay.
You could also have reading in your hand and then have the block in your gauge. Like it's a lot easier to set up that 1-2 combo
Right.
because they can stick for a while. So you don't happen to just have to have them in your hand. They can be waiting there for you. And by virtue of it, that's a 2-turn thing, but just by virtue of doing an instant boost, Cyrus is charging to play it again, or hey, I got to do it and I get to move and I get a power for that. So like it's not always just oh, so clear you want reading. A, you might want to parry something. So it might be a regular thing. Or B, you're just getting a bunch of extra value out of doing it.
Right.
Like the backside Cyrus can instant boost just for the sake of instant boosting for +1 power, move one, or move one strike.
Right. But also these instant boosts all have utility. And you're saying that like the utility is good, you're probably going to want to use them for the utility, but also the utility like provides a mix up for your boosts.
Mm-hmm.
That's a new concept for old Gearface. It makes total sense. Like you could just be boosting for value, but you are also advancing a threat by parrying. And they at least need to consider that you are potentially going to be throwing a reading next turn or something.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And reading into having that being able to play it so many times and having it be sitting there for you when you're ready after you've charged up a giant thing of hey I've got 3+1 boosts on the board and reading treasure hunter great like you can really do a nice payoff with it because you've run people out of things. It's later in the game they're gonna have a higher discard pile. Like I with Syrus is definitely the character I've had the most really good reading plays with because he can move while he's doing it, has easy access to it, and charges by virtue of repositioning.
Right.
Um, so you can get a lot of really good calls with that. That's
Okay.
also why you don't necessarily need as much. Like they're really his ultras are great, but like you don't necessarily need to be above curve if you can say,
If you
hey,
can
you're
make
playing
them go play a card that doesn't make sense.
right, you can make them play a card that doesn't make sense, or you could hit out the card that would otherwise, like their last copy of a card that's otherwise at that speed curve or higher or above speed, or know what's in their hand. Like
Right.
you can make or other things into payoffs relatively easily, so you don't necessarily need something to be crazy initially.
Okay. So the things that you've described about Cyrus's Exceed mode are like a collection of strong traits. Like here are good things that he can do. Is your game plan when you've exceeded as Cyrus just kind of to abuse those traits and do a lot of strong things, or are you trying to land specific things when you've exceeded? Like, are you trying to set up a combo, or is it really just like, hey, all these things are really are really unreasonable to deal with for my opponent, and I can probably just run them over?
Mostly running them over.
Okay.
You are comboing, but you're not comboing into a specific answer. Like you're making the answer, right? You're not I'm comboing into my astral or into my X.
Right.
You're strong enough that you're like, all right, I'm going to do a combo, and then what is the payout? Like you can select the card based on what you have and what will work against that specific opponent to be the deliverer of the combo. Like you
Right.
are building a combo, but you're not building the combo into a specific piece per se.
Right. And with instant boost value and move one and +1 power and potentially strike sort of all flexibly on top of that, it doesn't sound like it's super hard to find a combo. Like it
No.
sounds like maybe not anything works, but you can probably you don't need
A lot of
really
things.
really specific game pieces.
No, and if you need them, you can pull them back.
That's a good point. Right. Okay. So the the mitigating factor, the thing that's keeping you from being able to just completely run the game however you want to, is sort of how much gauge you have and what's in it, and what
Yeah,
your
that's why
boost ammunition is.
that's why what I meant at the beginning when I said Syrus, I always like to flip. Like I will always flip unless I miss it, unless I can't. I will always flip in a game, but you
Right.
don't want to. You can't blitz it like crazy because if you haven't set up your gauge, like the front side gets gauge way easier. So
Right.
you need to have your gauge set up in time before you flip over, or you'll run out of stuff.
Okay.
Um, it's not ultimately reliant. Like you can just play the insta boost without having to pull them from your gauge or recur them. But it definitely like you want to have those that resources built up before you go over to the version of you that uses it.
Sure.
Um, if you're
So
running out of time, flip. But otherwise, it's not like the moment you have one gauge and three transforms. I wouldn't flip over.
and to hear you describe it, I can describing it in that way, I can totally see why Memories from the Deep is such an important boost to your line of play, because setting up your gauge means setting up an arsenal of boosts.
Mhm.
Okay.
Especially, they also the way that they function with this UA is if you use something from here, it does seal, but you get to move one first.
Okay. All right. So the now effect precludes any other card movement. You get it right away.
It resolves, and then
Okay.
it kills itself.
Okay. You don't get the +1 power, but you do get the movement.
Correct, because it will come into play as a boost with +1 power. It hits, and then it goes
And then it
away.
goes away. Got it. Okay. That
It will
makes
kill
total
you.
sense. So
Um,
so what boosts am I looking for to get in my gauge? And this might be a good opportunity to transition to talking about
yes.
his special boosts.
Um,
I have done this 88 times before. Um, but like again, among the normals, we have some very good instant boosts. Are some of the things that I'm looking to hit with just
yeah. So my favorite combo, these two,
okay?
sweet block focus, reading parry, lovely. They have so much value for him. You get so much out of them. They're so nice to be able to deliver a finisher or a big payout from something. They're huge threats. Um, aside from on defense, like they're not super active. They're huge threats. I love having them, using them. I love having them in my gauge. They, yeah, parry and reading, massive for Syrus. He just gets so much value out of them. Um, his retreat is really nice because you can get the heck out of the way. That's really nice. Retreat up to 4 spaces.
Right,
Now, you don't. I most of the times will almost always go all four because I want to be farther and they'll walk in on me. But technically, you don't necessarily always need to go all four, especially if you don't have if your long range options are out, and they have the ability to hurt you from being that far. You can stop before you go up to four. Remember,
right, right. It's
efficiency is not always the best move.
yeah.
Um,
Don't fall into the trap that I fall into. Move how
mhm,
far you need to move, not how far you can move.
correct. Now it is it's usually it's not that bad because it is usually almost always better to back all the way up because
Right,
you can recur stuff from your graveyard, so you can get these back into your hand again relatively easily.
right,
So you do have to do a thing to land them back into your hand, but if they give you the time for it, you can do that. And in the process of giving yourself the time, that might be going all the way far out over the board, so they have to walk in, and that might give you the time to recur something back.
right.
So I find going all the way out is usually the best option, but just something to keep in mind. Also, everything has an extra move on it, right? So like this is move up to retreat up to 5. Like that's really
Oh,
nice.
sure.
You can get out an extra space from it, which is really really nice. You don't typically want to move in, but having advance 3 is nice if you get cornered because if you're at range, if you're in the corner here and you need to get over them, having the move up 3 is nice. But of the normals, I find retreat and then parry reading, lovely. Those two, awesome. Your ultras are awesome boosts. So, Symphony of the Deep has Silver Shadow, which is moved to any space at range 3 from the opponent. So you are just at range 3 now, or 2 or 4 if you want to be, and you're on the back. Hey, do you want to be at 2 for Treasure Hunter or something else? Okay, you're there.
Oh, Okay, so again, this will play as an instant boost. You resolve the instant boost, you do the thing, it flips over. Now it's a continuous boost. That continuous boost has a now effect, and then you
Mm-hmm.
execute that. Okay, so it's fuzzy positioning. You can be almost wherever, and on either side of the opponent too. Like you can be sort of wherever you want.
Yes, and it's really helpful because it's a teleport. So at range, if you're in the corner, you can get to the range. Like it's the ones that are move X spaces. You're limited to where you can get from there, or if you need to advance or retreat. This
Sure.
is just hello range 3 now.
Yeah, just
They can't corner you.
go
They're
to
down.
your best range, and then and and make them
And
deal with you.
correct. You're at your front side. Go to your best range. Have fun. Your backside, go to your best range, or 2, or 4 if you want to. Go to your best range plus or minus a little bit if that's better for you at this point in time.
Yeah.
Or, 4 just because, hey, they're going to walk in a little. Now, 4, I find they're less, like, greedy about coming in because people have dive or other things there. And because you're at 4, you've turned off, like, tidal wave and other things. So I definitely would rather go to 3 than to 4. But if you want to, especially if you know there's somebody with a walk 1, like, do X move 1, you could be at 4 just so they'll do X
To
1 and
make
then
them walk to 3, sure, or
yeah,
to make them deal with your
they're nonsense.
yeah. And also, I mean, like by the time we're talking about exceed mode, ultra boost, there's a decent chance that a lot of options are down on your opponent's side, and
Correct.
maybe they are starting to bleed resources, and there's an obviously strong position, and you're like, well, I'll go to that strong position.
Correct. So
Okay,
it's best range or best range plus or minus a little. And then that's really great because it's instant. You go there. Um, and if you want to with at reckless grade, you can go there and strike immediately.
right,
So it's really, really nice. It gets you exactly where you want to go. It's freedom of movement, the card. And it's nice to have in here just as an emergency too, because you have it just in case you need it. You have it when you want. You have it when you need. And they also, in a weird way, because they know they need to run in on you, but they might not be as it's not as easy to corner you if they know you could just jump out of it.
that you can just for basically for free go to your best range.
Yeah, or they'll do it anyway because you kind of have to do it anyway,
Right,
and you go, "That's nice. I'm glad you spent 4 force. I'm here now."
right, right.
Um,
So they've baited it out, but you got everything you wanted out of the exchange anyway.
yeah, it's hard to bait things out with Syrus because if they're in his gauge, he can do it again. Or if
Right.
it's even if it's your discard, hey, I'm gonna get that back. Like it's hard to bait stuff because he can get it. He's got so much recursion.
Right. So this isn't necessarily like a thing you're saving for the late game, and none of the things you're doing you're saving for the late game because if you get them in your gauge early, you can get them again as long as you have memories from the deep.
Correct.
Okay.
And you can get them when you need them for that in a way they
Right.
can't smack.
Right.
That's
Right.
why again it's a good attack, but the boost is really nice.
Right.
Um, Dredge Fury, love Dredge Fury. So the Riptide, both players draw up the 3 cards, take another action. It's
Are
awesome.
are you using this to increase the probability that you land a reading, Coronair?
Oh, I would never.
I'm ending the
Yeah, that's
lesson
what you
right
do.
now. You're a criminal.
Oh, it's beautiful to watch them draw cards and then you read those cards out of their hand. If you don't, if you don't think, like, you don't know better and you don't think about it, especially because they might be like, "Oh, reading's out." Oh, it's in your gauge.
Right.
Um, your reading is so readily available and sneakily available that like they might not realize it. Then you put the cards in your hand that you're about to call out of their hand and get to move strike with. Or if they do know, they have to make the delightfully awful choice of, do I want 3 free cards? Or do I but if I do so, I risk a reading that I can almost be certain is there.
Right.
I have threatened people out of not taking them. Like people who don't know better take the cards. People who know better, like I think more often than not, don't take the cards or will take like 1.
They have to agonize over it. And you, meanwhile, there's no reason for you not to take 3 cards.
0. You
Okay.
take all those cards. Also, if you go over your hand size, you don't care. If you have Aria, you can. If you have a reading, you can strike because it's taken another action, so you can play reading off of it. Or
Right.
you have Aria of the Winds, you can discard the continuous boost that it becomes in by virtue of playing it, or a different one if you want. If you have another one out, to strike immediately, so you can get above hand size with this.
Oh,
Um,
hold on. Whoa. So wait, this is the thing we were talking about, an hour ago when
Yes.
you
When I
sort of
was like,
sneakily
oh, there's a
mentioned.
thing.
So
Yeah.
wait. So I can once per turn after resolving an action that does not cause a strike, you may discard one of your boosts. All right. So, um, uh, Riptide. We both draw 3 cards. Whatever. Um, this becomes a continuous boost. I'm this Syrus, right? This becomes a
Either
continuous.
one.
Yeah, both work. This becomes a
Yeah.
continuous boost. I take another action. Um, Light. Uh, this I am resolving an action that does not cause a strike. I discard
Mm-hmm.
one of my boosts. I do. I just have preemptive strike.
You kind of, yeah, basically.
All right,
Hello.
sick.
It's great. And it's likely to be way more likely to be in your hand because you just drew 3 more cards.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So I will find a boost that I'll be able to play that I can then strike with. Um. Yeah. All right. That's messed up.
you know what's even more fun when you do this? You draw 3 cards. You get your cards. They either take the risk for the reading, or they don't. And then, hey, guess what? It's not unfrequent that I have a second copy of it either here or in my gig, and then I do it again.
Oh my
So
god.
then they either they're now passing on 6 cards, or I'm damn sure I'm gonna get that reading.
Right.
Like and they don't necessarily know a second one's coming either. So when they make the decision to not take the cards and then are hit with a second one, they have to either commit fully to that or
Like do this
opposite they
weird
kick
half measure.
themselves. Yeah, the half measure when really they probably at that point should have just taken all of the cards because they're
Right.
probably going to get it reading anyway, but they
Right.
didn't know better.
And like the take another action part. Okay, now I'm this Cyrus. Dredge Fury or Riptide. Take another action. Take another action. I've just given myself +2 power and move 2 on top of all that.
Yeah,
Oh dear.
that's how I would move to. Or if you're on the front side and you are able to transform, you can do them both. You can transform. And they're both in your gauge now, so hey, you can do
Whoa.
them again later.
Okay, interesting. So I've just stacked. I did all of that without committing to a strike. I just added a whole bunch of value to my gauge. I got more boosts later on. Yeah, that's really messed up.
Yeah, I wouldn't double the so not wouldn't ever, but doubled and then transforming is make sure you're not gonna have to discard cards from your hand. Like if you have barely any
Right.
hand, that could be a good refill. But if you do it with one and then exceed, you've got a lot of value, and then you're able to guarantee it here and keep going.
Right.
Especially if you didn't actually have that reading that you kept threatening to say that you had, you can just be like, okay, this is here now. I can do it again
Right. And
later.
anytime I want to, I can make this good reading play happen. Okay.
Right. Or they didn't take the cards, so now you're like, all right, that's all right. Either I'm going to do it anyway because I think I know what you have, or I don't have to do it. I can just exceed, or I can do something else to just hit confirm this, put it in my gauge.
Right. Right. Okay.
Um, it's a disgusting choice. When you don't know better, it's awful. When you do know better, it's somehow more awful. I'm doing it twice in a row. God, I love it.
Right. You've sold me. I am
That,
also now a criminal.
that's why it's like it's not a bad ultra. It can be a really nice ultra 3-6 with that can hit up to 8. You can move out super easily. Like the ultra in and of itself isn't bad. You recur a card. That's a nice thing. But by God, that boost.
Yeah,
That boost is
that
so
boost
good.
seems hard to give up. Okay.
Yeah.
So we got
So
I'm
good.
sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
I was gonna say so we've got 2 other boosts in the kit to talk about. Where to
You're not as fun.
next?
So we can go to treasure hunter. Add a card from your hand to your gauge. Do you really need a card from your hand to your gauge? Okay, cool. More often than not, this is like because treasure hunter can sometimes be hard to actually do things with, even though the payoff is awesome. 5 powered, 3 gauge differential.
Yeah.
Even though it can be awesome if you actually can get it to hit, if it's not the right card for you at the time or you don't think you can get it to hit, the boost isn't that great on its own, but it is an instant boost for you to start queuing your things off of. So if you want to do this, you can just make it the front side not really value. Like it could be ultimately +2 gauge, but the back side it can be move 1 +1 power, Q Siren's Call. Like it's a boost to have an instant boost.
And
It's
it's
not
on
exciting
it's on like a
necessarily.
relatively low-ish value card or low priority card, so it's an instant boost that you're pretty happy to throw.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much. Nothing exciting, but it functions.
Sure.
And then, and also again, it can be just +2 power. It just +2 power and a gauge, with Siren's Call in the back. So
Right.
that's nice.
Right.
Tidal Whirl, the boost is good. It's move 1, draw a card, so you get to move 1 and prep, which on the front, yay, that's nice. That card will probably go here, which gets it into your ever-churning cycle of the ocean. But on the back, it's not that thrilling. On the back, it's a little bit better because it's move 2 +1 power, which is a lot stronger.
Sure.
I find Tidal, it's a good boost. It really is, especially on the flip side. I just find Tidal Whirl is so good that I don't use it. I want to use it as an attack or hold it as a defense more than I want to play the boost. This is like the only of his cards that I usually go the other way around with as a lean towards
everything
the
else
attack
you're
over boost.
preferring to boost over attack.
Yes.
Right.
That being said, even if you boost it, it is, I've done it because if you're in the middle, if you have, like, I've had 8 +1s on the board, and then if this is what's gonna set you into the right spot to go off, do that, right? Like don't not do it if it's the right move. It's not that valuable.
Sure.
But I would usually play it as the attack rather than the boost. You can still play. It's not as bad to boost with because he can recur it in the ways that he has, especially if you have a recursion plan in mind. So once it's sitting there, it's not as lost to you as it is for most people.
Right.
But yeah, of all of your cards, this is the guy I hold the throw as opposed to doing anything else with, unlike the rest of everything that Syrus does.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay, so that's the special kit. That's the ultras. That's the boost. These boosts seem really, really fun, especially when I start to mess with some of this stuff. I have a couple questions about normals and a couple questions about economy. And then I think we're probably pretty good to wrap up.
Yeah, I think so. That's the bulk of it.
Yeah. So we've actually talked quite a bit about normals, and I can kind of infer some things that we haven't quite mentioned. Things like, wow, we mentioned that Sweep and Focus are amazing cards, and we really want them on defense because we're bad at range 1, and my opponent's going to be clocking me at range 1. Wow, all these instant boosts seem really good when I can do this stuff.
Also, especially with Sweep and Focus, if you defend with them, you get the defensive value, and because they're in your gauge, you now have them set up to, well, at least for Focus, not for Sweep in this case, but at least for Focus, now you're not losing the opportunity, unlike the regular trade-off where you lose the opportunity to play reading or use Focus as a defense, you get both.
Right. And again, one of the reasons why Syrus's reading is so scary is it can come from his gauge. So some of these attacks are pretty self-explanatory, partially because you've already explained them. Of what I'm using these for, like anything with an instant boost, it isn't really an either or. I can use both. Are there any other particularly important normals interactions for Syrus that I need to be aware of, or is he pretty much using his normals the way that any other zoner would, minus these particular instant boost interactions that I need to be aware of?
In general, and I might be forgetting things here because we just had a whole big long thing. In general, for me, your normals are mostly cover your ass. I don't have range 1, and instant boosts. And instant and continuous. They're there for your boosts and for in case you get stuck. Like for boosts for beginning of the game, you don't have that much going on, or you get stuck at range 1. But mostly you want to use them for their utility rather than for anything else. The most notable things, I think, are what we've spoken about before with the defensive, the reading parry combos, defensive options, Sweep having +2 speed when you can do a bunch of other nonsense with it is really, really nice, and you need Sweep because you don't have a lot of range 1 or defense. Nothing particularly different about your spike other than it could be a nice, you can feed things into making spike really scary. But you don't tend to have that much speed. So if you're going to make spike scary, you're going to make it scary in a reading sort of sense, not in a...
You also have 2 cards over here that kind of do a fair amount of what spike does. Yeah. Okay.
So you, it's nice in regular ways, but unlike you can use the thing there, but it's not like a crazy combo piece the way other things are per se. Same with
Right.
most of the other normals. Like you use them regularly. I think that there is going to be some stuff, but I think the major things of note is parry reading. Um, your +2 speed is awesome. Your +2 power, being able to become a +3, hitting different breaking points can be really, really nice.
Right.
And
And
then
lots of above curve options to make confirming that power pretty easy.
correct, or stacking on. Like if you have done a positioning war and you've ended up with 4+1 boosts,
Right.
hey, grasps hits for 7 now. Like or
Right. Right. Yeah.
or 8.
That becomes ridiculous when you have played your positioning well.
Correct. So on curve options, like at or like higher speed options, can be nice in terms of delivering your like what you've already set up.
Right.
But just they are your they're mostly boosts, and they are your options to deal with not having a lot super close, and people knowing you don't have a lot super close.
Sure. Sure. And I mean, with a zoner kit, your normals are going to have to hold down your melee range play.
Yep.
Makes
You
sense.
can also tech strike, which I mean other seasons make you tech strike, which I think is worse. But not being forced to, but being able to tech and strike,
Right.
is nice because it says, "Hey, you set up. No, you didn't," and I go.
Right.
Which is really really nice. It also lets you, if you have it in your gauge, you don't use it as much, but it has the open threat that, hey, you can't boost war with me because I will. People typically boost war with continuous boosts. I
Sure.
can not only get rid of your continuous boosts far easier than most people can because I can have way more dives, way more text than most people can, and I can hold it way easier. I can hold it where it's not taking up a space in my hand, where it's not really a great attack. But I can hold it somewhere else. And when I do it, I get a whole bunch of other nonsense for doing it that you don't. Like I get positioning or power or lots of other things. So
Right.
he's got it's a lot easier for him to it's a nice trick for a boost war with someone else who does boosts, who's just a continuous boost person, because they typically have single boosts that are stronger as opposed to your many little guys.
Okay. That makes sense. Um, so other than
Yeah.
that, other than like it sounds like mostly normals, normal zoner things for my normals, with a bunch of exceptions that we sort of already have gone over. Um, the other question I had was on economy, because on the one hand, the dude Prince Gage, he always has tons and tons and tons of resources, but I'm also like we said, like I'm looking to hoard those resources. Like I have tons of movement. I have a decent chunk of card draw, including a boost that I can't wait to play over and over again. How is my like am I going to need to be taking universal game actions like move and change cards occasionally? Or is my economy like pretty like when I have to do those things, is it a tough decision or is this sort of an easier part of his game plan?
It depends on what the cards are. So I find things that have like a regular continuous boost on them that I'm not throwing. Like if I got a spike and I gotta throw the spike away, okay. Um, and I don't have a setup going into it, right? So I always say, please, please spend cards to move. If you don't, and you sit there, you will die. Syrus tends to have a lot of ways to move and like function without having to hard cast move or draw. Because he's got so many move options. Drawing is a little bit more. You can regular pepper change cards. Especially because you're a season 2 character, right? You're looking for your transforms. You do it.
Right.
The only thing that you have draw on is Dredge Fury. Well, Dredge Fury and Tidal Whirl, but you're probably looking for Tidal Whirl.
Right. Yeah. If you're drawing cards, it's probably for this card.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Like so you drawing, yeah, that's the thing that you'll take the action for. Moving, you if you can, you really do want to be using your cards because you get so much extra value out of using Insta Boost to move or like your UA and such to move. That being said, if you need to do it, do it. Don't just hold for those. Just because your resources, you don't it's not you amass in a sense of you amass options, not you amass like upwards, except
Y-
for like that proxy sort of like you slowly will get those +1 continuous boosts there. So like
Right.
your strike will slowly get stronger. But your resource pile isn't like, hey, because I have X resources, I can spend them all for one giant big thing all at once. I mean you could do that with Dread Fury, but why are you not using Riptide? Um,
Right.
your gauge is like it's a plethora of different tools and different buttons that you can use,
Right.
and you want so much of it because you want to be able to have if you those things multiple times or like those different instances for when you need them, right? But it's not like you're going to be using all of it all at once.
Right.
So if you need
And
to use regular actions, do it because your gauge is more like a scalpel than like a hammer.
sure, yeah, and there's a limited number of strikes in the game. I probably am not going to be using every single boost in my gauge. Like there's only so many times I can hit my opponent before they die. But having the options there is still really valuable, and knowing that I can use it if I need to. So I would prefer, if I could, to uh, preserve those options at all costs and change cards or move with other things.
Right. But I
Okay.
wouldn't yeah, you would prefer to do that, but if you have to, it's a balance. It really is a balancing act. Like Cyrus, you do have to. Cyrus doesn't have like a lot of easy answers the way that certain other characters do. Where this is my game plan. I always do X.
Right.
Um, you really have to. You're managing that. All right, now's the time to use this because I won't have it available to me immediately later, or because I have to wait for it to come back around, or pull it back, or I've sealed it, right?
Right.
Like you are
Right.
managing that pool of what you're building for later to have and what you're using now, as well as like when is the time or what do I need. Um, More so than like going for any specific thing, you are trying to give yourself as many tools as you can and then figuring out which one you need and how do you execute it.
Right. Okay. So
And then
I have a ton of resources. I'm always going to have a ton of resources, and yet somehow things still feel like I'm still going to be making really difficult resource decisions because I'm
yes.
playing Exceed.
Right. You're not
Okay.
have I have a bunch of I don't have a bunch of coins. I have one coin and one potion and one health potion and one mana potion. Like
Right.
you are
And
the
I want to
guy.
keep them all
I want to keep them all. You're playing an RPG and you have one of each non-reusable resource and you're going to hold on to all of them and eventually you will have to
until
use
the
it.
final boss, and then I realize that I have 99 elixirs and I don't actually need all of
Correct.
them. I got you. Okay.
You
This
want
is
them all, you won't use them all.
this is a familiar situation to me. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So economy does not run itself, despite the fact that I'm going to have a lot of resources. There isn't a game plan. I'm going to be sort of playing with what I got and maintaining an arsenal of tools that will let me do some really strong things at a moment's notice.
You're doing
Um,
tactics, not strategy.
yeah. That sounds right. Um, shall we? Any other sort of strategic considerations that you want to mention, or should we move into counterplay and wrap the lesson up?
I think give me a hot second to think about it, but I think that is the bulk of it. You are Yeah, that is the bulk of it. Ultimately, you are looking for the holes in what they don't have, what you do have, or what things you have that really work, doing them over and over again, or what you can make work or run them out of.
Right.
Their bleed, that's why later in game is so scary because you can stall and run around and that process will make them spend a bunch of cards and all of a sudden A, you know what to hit with reading and B, you just know what to throw in general.
Right. And
So
you have recursion and they probably don't.
right. So you are really focused on being adaptable, just getting yourself all right, this is my new game plan, get myself into position, let's go. Never mind, we're changing this game plan. Like you are not it's not that you have no game plan, but you have to be able to change ebb and flow with your game plan. And quite literally, you are the ocean. I find myself jumping back and forth on the board just like that all the
Sure.
time.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. So
So yeah.
my opponent has seen this lesson. They know what to expect from Syrus. Um, what are they doing to stop him? Other than, I mean, we mentioned it seems like a really big part of the Cyrus counterplay is kind of baked into the lesson at this point that they are going to go to range one and punch you.
Yep. Okay.
Other than that, are there any specific weaknesses that you can exploit? Anything that he really struggles with that they should be aware of?
Yeah. So as we said, range one punch. Keep an eye out for when his options are actually out. So he has ways to recur things, but if he hasn't done it yet and he's out of things, especially because his ranged options are going to have a transform up. You can start making that mix up way less scary, or realize that, hey, you don't actually have to be as afraid of certain other ranges,
Right.
at least without a little bit of warning. You also, I think you could do is, if Syrus has been setting up doing his little ocean wave nonsense, he's going over here, he's stacking a +1, or he's stacking a hit add to gauge, he's going over here, he's stacking, he's waiting. If you just fire off a strike that neither of you will hit with 0 investment into it, and he
Oh yeah,
whiffs,
you
that
won that
sucks.
strike.
You won
Yeah,
that strike. And like if you're like, all right, I'm gonna throw cross at range 4, because you have nothing that hits me like at 6, like that far. And that being said, don't put yourself so far out that you can't, either you don't want to be out there or you can't get in. And he has his options left. Like don't not think about positioning, but like, hey, I'm gonna dodge in or dodge out, or I'm just gonna throw something at a range that doesn't actually hit, as long as I know you don't hit me. Cool, you won that.
right.
All his momentum is gone. Like if he loses momentum, it's hard for him to pick it back up again. Because he had to spend, he invested into those strikes, and he gets a lot more out of them. But he has to hit you.
He's got a hit, right?
You can bankrupt this man if he shorts his stocks. Like you gotta. Oops, we whiffed it. I spent 1 card and 2 card, and you spent 5. That's great.
Right,
That's a
yeah,
thank you very much.
and for a character who is defined by his resource gain, suddenly overinvesting and losing that edge, what does he have at that point? He's gotta spend a whole lot of time building that stock back up.
By the same power of you can get a lot of value out of like either making him whiff, even if you're not hitting, or if you know that he's just trying to connect, you can punish him for that. Like if you're like, all right, he's gonna throw something short, throw something really fast that, unless it dodges, but like if it's fast and close but doesn't dodge, like if he throws out Symphony of the Deep, because like something like that, or a grasp, you can, and you know that's what's coming because he just needs to connect. A jab, you can just play a slow, heavy hitter and be like, "Yep, I know you just want to connect." It's so valuable for you to connect instead of playing something that's gonna quote win the strike.
Right.
You can deal a bunch of damage in the process of that,
Sure.
because the more he invests into it, the more desperately he just needs to hit you. That you can end up getting a whole bunch of life off of him.
So so
Pretty early.
he's going to he's going to get a resource advantage over you if that's what he's trying to do, but you can make him pay for it.
Correct.
Got it.
You can either bankrupt him, make him pay for it, or those are longer term ways of dealing with it. Going to range 1 is a, like in really close range 1 and such, is a short term way to deal with him. It does solve a lot of problems in that exact moment, but in long term, Syrus has a million ways to deal with movement. Like he
Right.
can get out of there relatively easily. He can't get it. He has no life gain, and if you cut him off from his money, there is no more sugar daddy. He cannot get more gauge that easily. Like he gets
Right.
it, but that's a really much more difficult problem for him to solve in the long run, especially if you do it early, than it is for I walked into range 1. I walked
Right.
into range 1 is a great short-term solution. It is not the long-term solution.
So going to range 1 on its own will not beat Syrus, but going to range 1, consistently sticking to range 1, and also either making him whiff or forcing him to pay a huge amount of life for all of his resource advantage, that might be enough to beat him.
Or if you've stopped his resource flow before you go in there, then he's gonna have a way harder time getting out.
Okay,
Or
so
gonna have
so
to spend
you
it.
you bankrupt him and then you close in rather than try to assault him with like full resources.
Correct.
Okay.
Um, or you have enough action economy to get in and strike.
Sure. Okay, yeah,
The same time.
you're playing a Guilty Gear character. You're playing somebody with action compression or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So and obviously Cyrus can mitigate some of this by not overcommitting and playing sort of a slower game, but that means he's slowing down his resource engine. That's giving his opponent more time to stop him. So there's counterbalances to this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so you either have time to deal with him or he slows down, or he has to do it in rush mode. And if he's doing it in rush mode, that works, but he'll blitz himself out. So if he's going Speed McGee, eat all his stuff,
Right.
just see if you can like field it out a little bit, he'll run out. And
Yeah.
then you can punish him for that.
Okay. That makes sense.
So there's the difference between a short term dealing with and a long term dealing with. Also, keep an eye on keep an eye on those resource bleed. He's gonna have a big gauge. He's gonna have going to try and have one copy of each of his transforms out. So he's gonna get a lot more predictable than you think he is, and his attack patterns are going to change in the second half of the game when things are out as much.
Right. He won't be able to zone you as effectively, and he's going to be relying on other ways to kill you.
So you might know more about what's coming if you're able to deal with it.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's
That's Syrus.
that's Syrus. Don't let him get his transforms. Like if he, aside from hard transforming, which you can't prevent, you can they're not super hard to get to hit with, but they're also not like freebies to attack either.
And he doesn't have any what's that Galdred boost on Hydra Helix? Like he doesn't have any free cheat ways to cheat transforms.
Or like Chaos Scissors pay for your life.
There you go. Yeah. He doesn't have any cheats other than EX transforming. So he's gonna have to do it honestly. It's just that they're not that hard to land.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's there's a million more things to this guy, but like I've talked too much already. I'm sorry. I can't be concise to save my life, but like it's an overview.
Koronair, the name of the series is Excess Exceed. You are doing just fine. This has been awesome. No, I've been looking forward to learning about Syrus for a while, and you've more than delivered. So thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure. I think I've got what I need. I'm really excited to go try to put some of the stuff into practice. Everybody watching this, I hope you also enjoy this. I hope you go play some Syrus too. Koronair, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you had me back. I had a lot of fun doing the other ones, and yeah, and this every time we talk, it reinvigorates my love of this game and my desire to go play with these characters. I have so many fond memories, and I now want to. I hate the sun, but I now want to go swim in the ocean. So,
well, the at least the feeling of wanting to go play cards is mutual. I'm really looking forward to go and try some of this stuff out. So thank you for that as well. But I think that's it for this episode. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Koronair, thank you so much for your time. I will see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
bye bye.